Here's how it works. We pour you the first chunk of a romance novel. No charge, no catch, full audio. And then we cut you off at the exact place the book becomes impossible to put down. You buy the rest, or you lie awake. Your call. Today, Wine Me, Dine Me by Aurora North. 40-year-old vineyard owner, 90 days from foreclosure, sitting across the desk from the sommelier who tore her last release apart in print. She has to swallow her pride and hire her. The sommelier shows up in jeans and a Bronco, takes one look at the wine program, and starts dismantling it. Then she takes a look at the vineyard owner, divorced, rigid, untouched, and starts dismantling her too. Quietly, patiently, with one hand on her wrist and a glass between them. Sapphic awakening, age gap, scorching heat. The kind of book where you don't realize you've been holding your breath until Chapter 7. Chapter 1.
The bank had better wine than the bank deserved. Mr. Halloran had set out 3 glasses of a passable Sonoma cab in the conference room, which Natalie understood was meant to be a kindness. We know who you are, we know what this is, and which she also understood in the part of her brain that had been doing this for 19 years was the only kind of cruelty that wore a tie. They were going to take her vineyard while letting her drink someone else's wine. The cab wasn't even bad. It would have been easier if it were bad. She sat with her hands folded in her lap. Her knees were together. Her shoulders were back. She had been told at 6 that a Rousseau did not slouch, and the lesson had been sticky. She had not slouched in a chair in 34 years. We've extended once already, Natalie. Mr. Halloran was looking at the file rather than at her, which was itself a small mercy. We can't do it again. The board won't approve it. I went to the wall for you in March. I know you did. 90 days. I understand. By November 1st. I understand. He looked up then finally, and she saw, to her quiet surprise, that he was sorry. He had known her father. He had been at her wedding. He had been at the funeral. He looked like a man who had been asked to put down a horse he had personally watched be born. There is, he said carefully, the offer. I know about the offer. Mr. Whitfield is, I'm told he's prepared to be flexible. I know about Mr. Whitfield. He nodded, slowly. All right then. She drank the rest of the cab in one swallow that her mother would not have approved of, and she stood and she shook his hand, and she said thank you for your time, because she had been raised to thank people for things that did not require thanks, and she walked out of the bank at 4:47 on a Tuesday afternoon in August with 89 days left to save everything her grandfather had built. She did not cry in the parking lot. She had not cried in the parking lot once in 2.5 years, and she was not going to start over a man named Halloran. She got into the car. She put her hands at 10 and 2. She drove home. The drive from Santa Rosa back to the estate was 40 minutes. She did not turn on the radio. She had stopped turning on the radio in Charles's car years ago because he liked it and she didn't, and after the divorce, she had simply not turned it on in her own car either, and at some point the silence had become a thing she had chosen rather than a thing she had inherited. It was hers now. She could fill it or not fill it. Today she did not fill it. The road climbed through Gold Hills going dry at the end of summer, and then dipped, and then there was the long curve at West Side Road where the oak canopy closed overhead, and the temperature dropped 6 degrees and you could smell the river, and she rolled the window down for that one stretch the way she always did, and for a moment, for the length of one curve and one cool breath of bay laurel, she was not a woman whose family vineyard was 89 days from being eaten by a man in a tie. Then the canopy ended. Then the light came back. Then she was again. The estate sat at the head of a long oak-lined drive that her great-grandfather had planted in 1947, every tree the same age as her grandfather and now thicker around than a man could reach. She turned in. She drove up. She parked in the gravel by the cellar door instead of by the house, because she did not want to walk past the front porch, where her mother might be on the swing reading a book and might look up and ask how it had gone. Marisol was on the porch. Of course Marisol was on the porch. Marisol stood there with a stem glass cradled between her thumb and her two fingers, balanced loose, the way you hold a glass when you have been holding wine glasses for 30 years and have stopped thinking about it. The wine inside was a Pinot by color, the dark wet red of something good, and Natalie did not need to walk closer to know which Pinot it was, because there was only one Pinot at this estate that Marisol Cruz would carry out onto the porch with that particular set to her mouth. "No," Natalie said before she had even closed the car door. Marisol said nothing. "Marisol." "No. I haven't said anything." "You're about to." "I am going to," Marisol agreed, "but I haven't yet. Come up here." Natalie came up there, because Marisol had said come up here to her in that voice every August since she was 8, and her body was 20 years older than her stubbornness. Marisol handed her the glass. She tasted it. It was the 23. Of course it was the 23. It tasted the way it had tasted every other time she had tasted it for the last 14 months, which was clean. Correct. Balanced. Cherry, a little tobacco, a little forest floor, a finish that was, she would have said elegant. Her father would have said elegant. Her grandfather, if she were being honest with herself in a way she had not been honest with herself in some time, would have used a different word. Behave was a word she had heard used about it. By a stranger. In print. A woman, the byline had said. S. Vega. Natalie remembered the byline because she had cut it out of the magazine and put it in the second drawer of her desk under a stack of receipts she did not need to keep, and she had not looked at it again, and she had not thrown it away. A wine that has been told its whole life to behave. She handed the glass back. "Hire her," Marisol said. "Absolutely not." "Natalie. She's a vandal, Marisol. You read what she wrote. You read what she wrote about the Ruthers." "I read what she wrote about the Ruthers. The Ruthers Chardonnay last year was mid. Mid? My granddaughter taught me that word. It means never mind what it means. The wine wasn't good. She said so. They were furious. She was right. It's not the same." "It is exactly the same." Marisol sat down on the porch swing. The chains creaked. The chains had been creaking since 1981. Diego had refused, on principle, to oil them. "Mija. She is the best in the country at what she does, and she lives 3 hours away, and I have it on extremely good authority that she just walked out of an 8-month at a Healdsburg place that did not deserve her. She is available right now. She is the best person alive at this thing. You have 90 days to do. Hire her." "She'll laugh at me." "She probably will. And then she won't take the job." "Mija." Marisol's voice did the thing it had done at the funeral, the soft thing, the thing Natalie was unprepared for at 4:50 on a Tuesday in August in 89-degree weather with no makeup left on her cheeks worth speaking of. "She wrote 800 words about your wine in a magazine that runs reviews of 200. Do you understand what I'm saying? She did not write 800 words because she didn't care." Natalie did not say anything for a while. "I don't want her here," she said finally. "I know. I don't want anyone here." "I know that too." The porch swing creaked. The light went the gold it went, at 5:30 in August. Down in the valley she could hear someone running a tractor. That would be Diego, probably, working a row he didn't need to be working. From the direction of Block 7, she could hear the very faint fizz of cicadas. 89 days. 88, by the time the sun finished going down. "Send the email tonight," Marisol said. "Before you talk yourself out of it." "I'll think about it." "Tonight." "Marisol." "Tonight, Natalie." She took the glass back from Marisol's hand and finished it. She did not send the email at 6. She did not send it at 8 or at 10 or at 11:47, when the house had gone quiet, and the only sound was the ice maker dropping a fresh batch in the freezer, and the very faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hall that her mother had wound the morning of the funeral, and had, to Natalie's knowledge, never wound again. She sat at her desk in her office on the second floor of the main house, in the room that had been her grandfather's office and her father's office and was now hers. The desk was walnut. The lamp was brass. She had a glass of the 23 next to her right hand, and a notepad in front of her, and a cursor on a blinking page that said, "Dear Ms. Vega." She had typed that much 3 times and erased it twice. She had erased the second one because "Dear Ms. Vega" sounded like a child writing to a school principal, and what she meant was, "I am offering you an enormous amount of money to come tell me what is wrong with my wine and possibly with me." She had typed Ms. Vega and erased it. She had typed Sloane and erased it, and then sat and looked at the empty page for a full minute, and then typed Ms. Vega again. She got up. She walked to the bookshelf. She did not open the second drawer of her desk, where the review had been for 14 months, because she did not need to. She had opened it enough times that she could see the page laid out without looking. She knew where every line break fell. She knew where the editor had bolded a phrase as a pull quote. A wine that has been told its whole life to behave. She had been told her whole life to behave. She had behaved. She had married a man she did not love because he had been raised in the same wine country, and her father had said this is a good match for the families, and she had run the estate while he ran his consulting firm in the city, and they had seen each other on weekends and at functions, and once, 4 years in, she had asked him in a hotel room in Napa whether they would ever have children, and he had said, "Do you actually want them, Natalie?" And she had thought about it for a long time and said, "No, I don't think I do," and that had been one of the more honest conversations of their marriage. They had divorced quietly. He had kept the consulting firm. She had kept her name, which she had never given up, because Rousseau was the name of the wine. There had been no fight. There had been no other women, for him that she knew of, for her ever. There had been no other anyone for her. She had been 26 when they married. She had been 38 when they ended it. She had been 19 in a college dorm in Davis, when she had pressed her thigh against another girl's thigh under a study table in the library, and felt something that had told her, very clearly in a single word, who she was, and she had been 19 in the same week when she had decided very calmly that the cost of being that thing was higher than the cost of being someone else, and she had not pressed her thigh against anything since. She had run a vineyard. She had hosted dinners. She had been on a board. She had been told her wine was elegant. 40 years old. 21 years of wine. 2.5 years divorced. 1 bank deadline. 1 review in a drawer. 1 sommelier in San Francisco who had used 800 words to call her wine well-mannered and dead. She thought about what kind of woman wrote like that. She had thought about it more than once, over 14 months, in the dark of this same office, and had each time stopped thinking about it the moment she noticed she was thinking about it. She did not know what Sloane Vega looked like. She had not Googled her. She had been, on this point, exceptionally disciplined. She sat down at the desk. She erased "Dear Ms. Vega." She typed, "Sloane." Her hand was shaking, very slightly on the trackpad. She set the wine glass down on the coaster so she would not knock it over. "My 23 Pinot deserved your review. I have 90 days to make sure the 25 doesn't. I cannot promise you a project that won't fail. I can promise you a vineyard worth the work and full creative authority, on contract through November 1st. The fee is whatever you ask. The cottage is yours." She read it. She read it again. She thought about the word please. She thought about adding it. She thought about how her grandfather had once said, "You can ask anyone to do anything if you ask correctly," by which he had meant, she understood now, at 40 much too late, you can ask anyone for help if you are not too proud to be the kind of person who asks. She added it. Please. N. Rousseau. She read it a final time. Outside the cicadas had stopped, and the only sound was the clock. She sent it at 2:14 in the morning, August 24th, into a quiet house at the head of a long oak-lined drive, with a glass of behaving wine cooling at her elbow and a deadline she did not yet know how to meet. She closed the laptop. She did not sleep. Chapter 2. The rooftop bar on West 29th had a wine list that Sloane had personally rewritten over the last 8 weeks, and she was sitting at the end of it now on the last night of her contract, drinking a glass of Gruner she had chosen for the By the Glass program because it was a wine that made you stop talking for a second when it hit your tongue. The bar manager had not stopped talking for the entire 8 weeks of her contract. And that's why I think we should do the cellar tour as a ticketed thing, like a real walkthrough, prefix, Sommelier led. Sloane? You're not listening. I have given you, Sloane said, 1,200 billable hours of listening. This last one is mine. He laughed and got up and went to talk to someone else, which was the result she had been engineering for the previous 40 seconds. She tipped her head back against the wall behind her banquet and looked at the sky over Manhattan in late August, which was the color of a peach that had been sitting on a windowsill for too long, and she thought one more night and then home, and then she remembered she did not have a home. She had a storage unit in Oakland. She had a one-bedroom she sublet by the month in Glassell Park when she wanted Los Angeles. She had a duffel in the trunk of her Bronco, currently parked in long-term at JFK, which was where she lived in the way other people lived in houses. It was fine. She liked it. She had liked it for 11 years. Theo arrived 8 minutes late, which for him was on time. He kissed her on both cheeks because he had spent a year in Bordeaux in his 20s and had never recovered, and he sat down across from her and gestured at the Gruner and said, "What am I drinking?" "You are drinking the second cheapest Pinot on this list, because I am running out of expense account." "You're a poet." "I'm an honest woman." "That is a lie." He smiled at her, over the menu. "How was the gig?" "Fine." "Fine?" "It was fine, Theo." "You walked out of 2 before this one." "I did not walk out. I finished my contracts. I just didn't extend." He ordered the Pinot from the server who came by. He was 42 and gay, and one of the 3 people in her life who got to ask her things in that tone, and she let him, because the price of having 3 people in your life who got to ask you things was that you let them occasionally ask. "How long are you here for?" "Flight's at 6 tomorrow." "To?" "LA." "For?" "Nothing in particular." He looked at her. "Theo." "I didn't say anything." "You are thinking it." "I am thinking many things. One of them is that you are 34 years old and beautiful and very good at your job, and you have not slept in the same bed for more than 8 months in 11 years, and at some point. Drink your wine." He drank his wine. She drank hers. The peach sky deepened, and someone 2 banquettes over laughed too loud at something a woman in a backless dress had said, and the city did its thing under them, and Sloane got out her phone because she had been ignoring it on principle for 90 minutes. There were 42 emails. Most were noise. One was a contract inquiry she would forward to her assistant in the morning. One was from her landlord in Glassell Park, who wanted to know if she was extending her lease. One was a Substack she had been meaning to unsubscribe from for 2 years. One was from Natalie Rousseau. She stared at it. "What?" Theo said. "Nothing." "Your face is doing." "My face is not doing." "Sloane?" She opened it. She read it. She read it again. She let out a single startled laugh. Short, surprised, the kind of laugh that was an involuntary muscle response to a piece of information you had not been prepared to receive. "What?" Theo said. "Do you remember," Sloane said, "the Pinot I reviewed last year? The one I called emotionally constipated." "You did not call it emotionally constipated." "That is what I called it." "You said it had been told its whole life to behave." "Same thing." "It is not the..." "Theo." What about it? The woman who made it just emailed me at, she checked the timestamp, 2:14 a.m. her time, asking me to come save it. Theo set his glass down very carefully. She what? She has 90 days to make the 25 not embarrassing. She wants to put me on contract through November 1st. Full creative authority. She is offering me whatever I ask. She is offering me a cottage. A cottage. A cottage, Theo. On the property? On the property. Sloane? I know. You are not allowed to say yes to this. I'm not? You are not. Why? Because, Sloane, you wrote 800 words about her wine. 800? You haven't written 800 words about a wine since the Mascarello in 2019. You spent 2 days in my apartment yelling at me about that bottle. You made me read it 3 times. You cared about that wine. And now she is out of nowhere, at 2:14 in the morning, offering you the keys to her cellar, and you are looking at me with the face you wear when you have already decided. I have not already decided. You have already decided. I am thinking about it. Sloane? She set the phone down. She picked up her Gruner. She took a long swallow she did not taste, which was a thing Sloane Vega did approximately twice a year, and which Theo, watching, registered. She had thought about that wine. She had thought about that wine more than she was willing to say out loud at a rooftop bar to a man who would put it in a column and not name her. She had thought about it because it had been, technically, perfect. The fruit was right. The structure was right. The barrel was right. Every single decision in the cellar had been the correct decision, and the wine had still arrived in the glass with its hands folded in its lap, and Sloane had spent the better part of an afternoon at her kitchen island in Glassell Park trying to figure out how someone could make every right call and end up with a wine that was so palpably afraid, and she had, eventually, in print, with a little more force than was strictly professional, said so. And then, for 14 months, in a way she had not entirely admitted to herself, she had wondered what kind of woman made a wine like that. She had not Googled her. She had been, on this point, exceptionally disciplined. I want another glass, Theo said. Get another glass. I want it from the part of the list you didn't write. There's nothing on this list I didn't write. Then I want a martini. He flagged the server. She picked her phone back up. She read the email a third time. Sloane? Just the name. No Ms. Vega. No hi. Just her name and a dash, like it was already a conversation. My 23 Pinot deserved your review. That was a sentence. That was a sentence. Sloane had read tens of thousands of sentences from winemakers and wine professionals in her career, and exactly none of them had ever opened with "my wine deserved that." Winemakers were the most defensive species on earth, more defensive than chefs, more defensive than poets, more defensive than men. They wrote her long emails about context and vintage variation, and what you don't understand about my philosophy. They did not write "you were right." I have 90 days to make sure the 25 doesn't. 90 days. Sloane did the math. That was harvest. That was harvest and the trade press cycle leading up to harvest. That was the thing itself. The woman was not asking her to come consult on a wine list. She was asking her to come help bring in a vintage that would either save the estate or be the last vintage the estate ever made. I cannot promise you a project that won't fail. Sloane put the phone face down on the table. What? Theo said. She's honest. What? In the email. She's honest. Theo, she said I cannot promise you a project that won't fail. Who says that? A desperate person. A desperate person says please help me, you don't understand, this is unfair, my philosophy. This isn't a desperate person. This is... She stopped. She picked the phone back up. The fee is whatever you ask. The cottage is yours. Then a single line on its own, 6 characters. Please. And then her name, the way a person signs something when they had been signing it their whole life. N. Rousseau. The thing was, Sloane did not know what to do with please. She had been negotiated with. She had been begged at by men who could not say please if you put a knife to their kidney. She had been wooed by estates and restaurant groups, and once, memorably, a hotel chain that had sent her a bottle of 1990 Krug to get her to take a meeting. She had not been wooed. She had not been begged. She had been simply pleased by a woman she had never met at 2:14 in the morning on a Tuesday in August, after a sentence that said, "I cannot promise you a project that won't fail," which was, Sloane was discovering in real time, the single sexiest thing a winemaker had ever said to her. "Oh no," Theo said, watching her face. Oh no. Theo. You're going. I'm thinking about it. You are not thinking about it. You are going. I am thinking about it, and if I go, it is for the wine, because the wine? Sloane Vega. What? What does she look like? How would I know what she looks like? You haven't. No. Sloane? No, Theo. I have not Googled her. I have been disciplined. You have been what? Disciplined. He started laughing. He laughed for a long time. He laughed the way Theo laughed when he had won an argument she didn't yet know they were having. He laughed until the server came back with his martini and gave him a careful look and went away again. What? She said. Nothing. Theo. You have been disciplined, he said. About the picture of a woman whose wine you reviewed. For 14 months. Sloane. Sweetheart. My darling. Apple of my eye. When was the last time you were disciplined about a woman? I am disciplined about many women. Name one. All of them. You are not disciplined about any of them. That is your entire personality. You walk into a room, you find the most interesting woman in it, you take her home, you leave in the morning. You are the least disciplined person I know about women. You are disciplined about contracts. You are disciplined about grapes. You are not disciplined about Theo. Women. I am leaving. You are not. I am paying my bill and going back to my hotel and answering this email in the morning when I can think. You are going to type the answer right now in front of me, because if you don't, I am going to type it for you on my phone and reply all to her and to Wine Spectator. She looked at him. He looked at her. She picked up the phone. She opened the email. She typed, Natalie. She stared at it. She had been preparing abstractly for 14 months to type that name, and now that she was typing it, she discovered with some alarm that she had been preparing. I'll be in San Francisco Friday. I can drive up Saturday morning. We can talk numbers in person. The wine deserved the 800 words. Whatever this is sounds like it deserves more. She read it. She read it again. She thought about the word please. She did not add it. Please was Natalie's word. Sloane had her own. Sloane. She hit send before she could think about it any longer. Done, she said. Done? Done. I'm going. Saturday. Theo lifted his martini. He clinked it gently against her glass. To 800 words, he said. To the cottage, she said. She drank. The Gruner had warmed. It was still good, but it was no longer the wine she had ordered. It was the wine that had been sitting at her elbow while her life had quietly turned a corner she had not given it permission to turn. That night, in her hotel room on West 44th, with the air conditioning roaring and Manhattan grinding beneath her window at 2 a.m. the way Manhattan did, she lay on top of the covers in her bra and a pair of boxers and looked at the ceiling and thought, finally, after 14 months and one rooftop and one please. I wonder what she looks like. She did not Google her. She turned out the light. She did not sleep either. Chapter 3. She had changed her shirt 3 times. This was the part she was trying not to think about. She had changed it 3 times and she was currently on the porch in the third one, which was a cream linen button-down she had owned for 9 years and had, until 35 minutes ago, considered a neutral piece of clothing. It was, on closer examination, not neutral. It was unbuttoned 1 button further than she usually unbuttoned it, and the sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and she had, without really registering the decision, taken her hair down at some point between the second shirt and the third. She buttoned the button. She unbuttoned it again. The morning was already warm. The button had not been the problem. "You look fine," Marisol said. I wasn't." "You changed your shirt 3 times. "How do you know that?" "Because I was upstairs putting fresh towels in the cottage, and I heard your closet door open and close 3 times in 20 minutes. "Marisol. I'm just saying you look fine. I'm not trying to look anything. The Bronco came up the drive at 10:11 in the morning, 3 minutes earlier than the email had said, which Natalie noticed because she had been watching the clock for the last 26 minutes and had been, uncharitably, hoping the woman would be late. It was a black Bronco. Older. The body was clean. It was, and this was the detail that Natalie noticed first, before she had registered any other detail, because she was a person whose father had taught her to read cars the way other people's fathers had taught them to read horses, dusty in the way a vehicle was dusty when it had spent the morning on rural 2-lanes with the windows down. Whoever had driven it up here had not taken the highway. Whoever had driven it up here had taken West Side Road, which was the long way, and through the canopy at the curve where the temperature dropped, which meant that whoever had driven it up here had wanted to. The Bronco stopped. The driver's door opened. Sloane Vega got out. The first thing Natalie thought, with the corner of her brain that was still functional, was "oh." The second thing she thought, with the same corner, was "oh no." Sloane Vega was, a woman in a black t-shirt and dark jeans and brown boots, with a flannel tied around her waist by the sleeves, and she was smaller than Natalie had been bracing herself for, which was somehow worse than if she had been bigger. She was lean. She was the kind of lean that had nothing to do with the gym, and everything to do with not sitting still. Her hair was dark and a little messy in the way of a woman who had been driving with the windows down, and she pushed it out of her eyes with the back of her wrist as she came around the front of the truck, and Natalie saw very briefly the inside of her left wrist, where a small dark mark, a leaf maybe, was inked into the skin. She had a duffel over one shoulder. A canvas tote with 2 bottles in it in the other hand. She was, Natalie registered with some distant alarm, not wearing a bra under the t-shirt. Not in a way that was meant to be a thing. In the way of a woman who had been on a plane the night before and had gotten dressed at 6 in the morning in a hotel room and had decided on her way to the rental counter that the world could deal with her. She came up the porch steps without hurrying. "Natalie," she said. That was the second thing. Sloane Vega was the first person in 8 years who had walked up the porch steps of this house and called her by her first name without being asked. "Sloane," she heard herself say in approximately her own voice. "Hi." "Hi." They were standing across from each other on the porch. Sloane was. Natalie had to look down very slightly, which was its own piece of information, because Natalie was 5'8" and not used to looking down at women, and Sloane was looking up at her, steady, easy, with brown eyes that were not doing anything in particular and were therefore doing a great deal. "You're shorter than I expected," Natalie said. She heard it land. She heard the shape of what she had said. She felt, without exaggeration, in real time, in her body, in the middle of her own porch in the middle of the morning, the precise and specific and wholly unanticipated sensation of wanting to walk into the side of the Bronco and stay there. Sloane's mouth did a thing. The corner of it. It was not a smile. It was the place a smile would have gone if she had let it. "You're warmer than I expected," she said. In person. I expected, based on the wine, somebody very cold. You're not. Sloane shifted the tote in her hand. Where do you want me to put these? What? The bottles. I brought you 2 bottles. Where do you want me to put them? Oh. Kitchen. The kitchen, just through. Show me. Natalie turned. She walked. She felt, with a clarity she was not used to having about her own body, every single thing her body was doing, the linen against her shoulder blades, the cold of the morning floor through the soles of her flats, the place at the small of her back where her own pulse was doing something inadvisable, and behind her she heard the quiet, even sound of Sloane Vega's boots on her grandfather's hardwood, and she thought, this is going to be a problem. Marisol was in the kitchen, pretending, with great dignity, to be making coffee. Marisol Cruz, Marisol said, holding out her hand. Vineyard manager. We talked on the phone. We did. Hi. Sloane shook her hand once, firm, and Marisol's eyebrows did a thing in Sloane's direction that Natalie did not entirely catch but understood the shape of. Marisol had liked her in the first 3 seconds. That was bad. That was very bad. Marisol's 3-second take on a person was the most accurate instrument in the county. Sloane set the tote down on the island. 2 bottles, she said. One you'll like. One you'll hate. Both are useful. Don't open them yet. Why not? Because I want you in the right room when you taste them. Sloane glanced around the kitchen, the long island, the windows that looked west over the Rose, the rack of glassware above the sink, the bowl of figs Marisol had set out an hour ago because figs were what was in season and Marisol believed in setting out fruit. Not this room. The tasting room. All right. Show me the tasting room. All right. Marisol's eyebrow went up another 1/4 inch. Natalie, on her way past, did not look at her. The tasting room was in the old stone barn at the bottom of the slope, the one her great-grandfather had built before he had built anything else on the property, including the house. It had been a working barn for 40 years and a tasting room for 50, and it was, Natalie was aware even as she was walking Sloane into it for the first time, the most beautiful room she owned. Sloane stopped in the doorway. She did not say anything for a moment. The light at this hour came in through the high east windows and laid itself across the long zinc bar and the polished concrete floor in long soft stripes. The far wall was the original stone, undressed. The ceiling was open to the rafters. There was a single tasting table at the center of the room, a slab of walnut on iron, and behind the bar, racked from floor to ceiling, every wine the estate had ever made, from her grandfather's first vintage in 1952 to the Pinot Sloane had eviscerated in print last June. Oh, Sloane said. What? Nothing. She walked in. She walked to the far wall. She put her palm flat against the stone, the way a person checked the temperature of a forehead. How old? The barn? 1896. What? Nothing. You keep saying nothing. I keep meaning it. Sloane turned. Her hand was still on the wall. It's a beautiful room, Natalie. Thank you. It's the most undersold beautiful room I've ever walked into. We're going to fix that. All right. Are you going to keep saying all right every time I say something to you? Because it's lovely. I just want to know if it's a feature or a bug. Natalie opened her mouth. She closed it. She felt, unexpectedly, the sharp, inappropriate edge of a laugh in the back of her throat, and she swallowed it down before it could happen, because she had not laughed in this room in a long time, and she was not going to laugh in this room with this woman in the first 10 minutes. It's a feature, she said. All right, Sloane said. That was the moment Natalie understood she was not going to win this, whatever this was, in any of the ways she had been planning to win it. They walked the property after. Sloane did not ask the questions Natalie had been braced for. She did not ask about the soil, she could read the soil with her boots. She did not ask about the rootstock, she had read the file on the plane. She did not ask about the philosophy of the house, or about the family, or about what happened with the 23, which was the question every consultant who had come up the drive in the last 2 years had asked within 45 minutes, and which had each time made Natalie want to sit down on the gravel and cry. What Sloane did was, she walked. She walked Block 1, which was the Chardonnay along the southern slope. She walked Block 4, which was the young Pinot they had planted in 19. She walked Block 7, which was her grandfather's planting, the old vines, the heart of the estate, and at Block 7 she stopped, and she crouched down at the head of a row, and she pressed 2 fingers lightly against the bark of the gnarled trunk closest to her, and she stayed there for a moment with her head down, the way another woman might pray. Natalie watched her crouch there in the August sun in jeans and boots, with her hair falling forward over her face, and she felt, for the first time since the bank, something that was not panic. She did not know what to call it. She did not call it anything. Sloane stood up. She brushed the dust off her palms. She came back over. How old? She said. My grandfather planted them in 54. So, 71. What? You've been making a very polite wine out of an extremely impolite block. Sloane looked back at the rows. These vines are not polite vines, Natalie. They're old. They've earned the right to be a little ugly. It's not, we can't. I'm not telling you how to make it yet. I'm telling you what I see. All right. There's that all right again. It is, Natalie said, a feature. Sloane looked at her. The look was, Natalie had been a polite hostess for 19 years and could read a guest's face as a habit of profession. Direct. It was direct in a way Natalie was not used to. It was direct without performance. It was a look that said, I see you, without bothering to dress the seeing up. Okay, Sloane said. They walked back. They sat on the porch with a glass of water each, not wine on Sloane's instruction. Not yet, she had said. I want a clean palate when we open the bottles tonight. And they talked about money for 40 minutes, the way 2 adult women who respected each other talked about money, which was clearly and without apology. Sloane named her fee. It was, Natalie understood, in the half-second pause before she said yes, fine, half what she could have charged. Natalie did not remark on this. Sloane did not explain it. They moved on to terms. Cottage, Sloane said. Yes. Through November 1st. Yes. Full creative authority on the cellar program. Yes. You are going to hate at least 3 things I am going to do in the next 60 days. That's fine. You're going to hate them in the moment, and you're going to be glad I did them in 6 months. All right. You are also, Sloane said, and her tone shifted very slightly lower, going to need to let me work, Natalie. You are going to need to let me run rooms. You are going to need to let me change things you have been doing for 19 years. If you cannot do that, this will not work, and I will get back in the truck, and I will not be insulted, and we will both have wasted a Saturday. I need you to tell me, before I unpack, whether you can do that. Natalie looked at her. She looked at her for what was probably a beat too long. Sloane did not look away. Sloane was a woman, Natalie was discovering, who had been built without the muscle for looking away. I can do that, she said. Okay. I'm going to be bad at it. At first. I figured. I'm telling you now. I appreciate it. A small thing happened at the corner of Sloane's mouth, which was not a smile. I'll be patient. Will you? Sometimes. That's the deal, Natalie. All right, Natalie said. The cottage was 140 feet from the back porch, separated from the main house by a gravel path that wound through the lavender her mother had planted in the 90s and that no one had pulled up after she had stopped tending it, and it was a small, clean square of a building. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, a stone fireplace, a screened porch on the back that looked east into the rows. Sloane stood in the doorway with her duffel over her shoulder. This is fine, she said. There are towels and Marisol stocked the fridge with. It's fine. All right. Natalie. What? Sloane was looking at her. The sun was going past noon, harsher now than it had been on the porch, and they were standing very close in the cottage doorway because the doorway was narrow and because Natalie had walked her over and not yet stepped back and had not yet actually registered that she had not yet stepped back. "Thank you for the email," Sloane said. "You're specifically the line about not promising me a project that wouldn't fail." "Oh, it was a good line. It was the truth. That's why it was good." "Okay. Most people don't tell me the truth in their first email." You don't have to say anything." Sloane shifted the duffel. "I'm going to unpack. I'm going to take a shower. I'll come up to the tasting room at 6. We'll open the bottles." 6. "Okay. Natalie." "Yes. You can step back now." Natalie stepped back. She walked with great care, with great composure, with her chin level and her shoulders back, the 140 feet up the lavender path to the back porch, and she went into the kitchen and she stood at the island, and she put both hands flat on the stone and let them be cold, and after a moment Marisol came in carrying a basket of figs and looked at her once and put the figs down and went back out without saying a word. It was 12:14 on a Saturday in August. She had 6 hours. Chapter 4. Sloane had set up the room before Natalie got there. This was a thing she did on the first night of any contract. She came into the tasting space alone, an hour early in jeans and bare feet, and she rearranged it. Not the furniture. The light. The temperature. The particular angle at which the glassware caught the dusk. She had, in 11 years of doing this, never once walked into a tasting room she could not improve in 40 minutes by moving 3 things. This room had taken her 12. She had pulled the long walnut table 6 inches off center, so it sat in the slow stripe of west light coming through the high windows. She had switched off 3 of the 4 overhead pendants, leaving the one closest to the bar, which threw a soft warm cone over the zinc, and left the rest of the room going gold and dim around the edges. She had pulled 6 glasses from the rack, 3 burgundy bowls, 3 Bordeaux, and set them in a row at the head of the table, mouths down on a clean linen. She had brought up 6 bottles from the cellar. 3 of Natalie's. 3 not. She had taken them out of their labels with a heat gun and a steady hand at the cottage kitchen counter while she'd been drinking a glass of water and listening to the cicadas through the screen, and she had relabeled them with masking tape and a Sharpie, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The numbered bottles were standing now in a tight cluster at the bar in a black wine bucket, their original labels balled up in her back pocket where Natalie wouldn't see them. She had also, at the cottage, done a thing she did not entirely want to admit to having done, which was, she had changed her shirt. Not 3 times. Once. The black t-shirt was on the floor of the cottage bedroom, and she was now in a soft button-down, charcoal, the sleeves rolled, 3 buttons undone, which was 1 button more than she would normally undo for a Saturday evening client meeting, and 1 button less than she would normally undo for a woman she had been thinking about for 14 months and had spent the last 6 hours not thinking about. She poured herself a half glass of water from the pitcher on the bar. She drank it. She set the glass down. She heard, through the open door of the tasting room, gravel crunch under a careful step, and then Natalie was in the doorway. She had changed too. Sloane registered it without looking directly at it, which was a skill she had developed in her 20s, the ability to take in a woman in her peripheral vision in one full pass without ever turning her head, and what she took in was silk. A blouse. Dark deep green, soft, the color of a cellar wall in low light. A skirt, long, the same color, with a small slit at the calf that meant the woman who had chosen it was telling the truth about wanting to be looked at, even if she did not yet know she was telling it. Her hair was up. It had been down on the porch this morning. She had, Sloane understood at a glance, thought about it. That was good information. 6 o'clock, Natalie said. 6 o'clock. I see you've moved the table. 6 inches. Yes. Better light. All right. Sloane allowed herself briefly to smile. "Come in," she said. "Sit down. Don't sit in the chair you usually sit in." "How do you know which chair?" "There is one chair at this table that is 2 centimeters more worn at the arms than the others. I assume that's yours." Natalie walked, with a small, controlled hesitation, past her own chair and around to the chair on the opposite long side. She sat. Her knees were together. Her shoulders were back. The lamplight from the bar pendant came across her at a low angle, and Sloane, walking past her toward the bottles, registered the place at the side of her throat where her pulse was visible against the high collar of the silk, and decided quite calmly, in the part of her brain that did not run her mouth, that she was going to need to be very, very careful with this woman. She picked up the first bottle. She picked up the corkscrew. "What are we drinking?" Natalie said. "You're drinking blind. I'm not telling you." "All right. I'm going to pour 6. 3 of them you've made. 3 of them you haven't. I'm going to ask you to identify which is which, and I am going to ask you to identify, in order, your 3. After that, I am going to ask you a different question, and that question is the only question that's going to matter tonight. Do you understand?" "Yes." "You don't sound like you understand." Am I going to be graded on this?" "Not by me." By yourself, Natalie. The whole point of tonight is that I'm going to make you grade yourself." She pulled the cork. It came clean, soft, with the whisper a good cork made when the storage had been right. She set it on the linen. She poured a small measure into the first burgundy bowl, 2 ounces no more, and slid it across the walnut to Natalie's hand. "Number 1, she said. "Take your time." Natalie was good. This was the thing. Sloane had been prepared on some level for Natalie to be good. The wine she had reviewed had not been the wine of a person who couldn't taste. It had been the wine of a person who could taste with extraordinary precision and had, somewhere along the way, decided that precision was the only form of tasting that counted. She had been prepared for Natalie to identify her own bottles. She had not been prepared for Natalie to identify them in this order, with this kind of language, with her eyes closed. "Number 1, not yours. Russian River. Probably the strip along East Side. 220, maybe 215, younger fruit. The barrel work is heavier than I'd do. Number 2, yours. 22 estate. 4th barrel, I think. That's the one we lost a little to Brett that year. We blended out most of it, but you can still find it if you look. Number 3, not yours. That's Joseph's. From down the road. It's the 21. He picked too early. He always picks too early. I love him. Number 4, yours. The 23 reserve. The one we held back." Sloane paused, pouring number 5. "Held back from what?" "Release. I held it back." "Why?" "It wasn't, I didn't think it was ready." "How long ago?" 10 months. "Have you tasted it since?" "Once. In December." "And?" A small pause. "It still isn't ready." She poured number 5. Number 5 was the wine Sloane had been waiting to pour all night. It was the 23 Standard Pinot. The wine she had reviewed. The wine that had been told its whole life to behave. She watched Natalie's hand close around the bowl. Natalie did not, this time, lift it immediately. She held it in her hand for a moment with her eyes closed. Sloane thought for a half-second that she might set it down without tasting it. She did not. She lifted it. She put her nose to it. Her nostrils flared very faintly, the way a horse's did at a smell it did not love but was about to take in anyway. She drank. She held it in her mouth. She swallowed. She set the glass down very carefully. "That's mine," she said. That's the 23. You don't have to, you can pour the 6th. I know what the 6th is going to be. I'd rather get to the 6th. Natalie. What? Open your eyes. Natalie opened her eyes. She looked across the walnut at Sloane. The pendant light at the bar threw most of her face into a soft amber and left her eyes in a green that was almost gray in this light, and Sloane registered, somewhere very far away from the part of her that was running the room, that she was looking at the most undefended thing she had seen on the face of a grown woman in a long time. "All 6, Sloane said quietly. "On the first sip. 3 of them yours, 3 of them not. You named them in the right order. You named the Brett barrel in your 22 with a precision I haven't seen in a working winemaker in maybe a decade. You named your neighbor's pick window. You named the reserve you've been holding back without me telling you it was in the bottle. Do you understand what I'm telling you? That I can identify a wine that you can taste at the highest level there is. I want to ask you the other question now. The one I told you I was going to ask." "Okay. Of these 6, Sloane said, which one did you love?" Natalie sat very still. The room went quiet around the question, in the way a room sometimes did when a question had hit the air it was supposed to hit. Sloane could hear faintly the hum of the wine fridge behind the bar. She could hear her own heartbeat in her left ear, which was a thing she didn't usually hear and which she was choosing for the moment not to interrogate. Natalie said. "Take your time. They're all good wines, Sloane." "That's not what I asked." "I know that's not. Which one did you love?" A long pause. "I don't know," Natalie said. "You don't know." I tasted them. I know what they are. I know what's in them. Number 3, Joseph's eye. Did you love it? I respect it. Did you love it? Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of those 6 wines, which one did you, Natalie Rousseau, love? Sloane? You don't know. You don't know. The words sat in the room. Natalie's hands were folded in her lap under the edge of the walnut table, which Sloane could not see but could read in the line of her shoulders, and her chin was up, not high, not defiant, but level, in a way that Sloane recognized as the posture of a woman who had been corrected in front of people her whole life and had learned how to take a correction without flinching. She was not flinching. Her eyes were very bright. She was not crying. She was, Sloane registered with a small, specific lurch, close to something that was not crying but was adjacent to it, in the way that all the things this woman did were adjacent to the things they were almost. "That's the problem," Sloane said. She said it gently. She had not planned to say it gently. She had planned to say it the way she usually said it, clean, surgical, professional, and instead, she had said it in a voice she did not entirely recognize, and she watched Natalie hear it, and she watched Natalie understand in real time that she had been heard gently, and she watched Natalie's hand reach for her glass of water with a small unsteadiness she had not had in any of the previous 6 pours. "That's the... You can taste anything in the world," Sloane said. "You can identify a Brett barrel in your own wine from 2 years ago in the dark with your eyes shut. There are maybe 40 people in this country who can do that. You are one of them. And in 11 years of doing this work, I have not once, asked any of those 40 people, which one did you love, and had them sit there and not be able to answer me. Sloane? I'm not scolding you. Look at me." Natalie looked at her. "I am telling you what I see. Because we have 88 days, and the wine you make for the rest of your life is going to come out of whichever answer you find to that question. And I cannot find it for you. I can put you in the rooms. I can pour you the bottles. I can ask you the question. The answer has to come out of your mouth. I don't. I know. I don't know how to. I know." A long silence. "I need you to try," Sloane said. "All right." Sloane reached for the 6th bottle. She did not, this time, ask Natalie to taste it. She poured a small measure into the second burgundy bowl in front of her own seat at the table, and she walked around to Natalie's side, and she set the glass down on the walnut next to Natalie's right hand without a word. Then she sat on the edge of the table. Not in a chair. On the table. 18 inches from where Natalie's right hand was resting on the wood. Close enough that Natalie's skirt, where it lay across her knee, was less than a hand's width from the place where Sloane's thigh met the table. Sloane was aware of the distance with a precision she had cultivated over a decade, and was, in this particular moment, slightly betraying. "Number 6, she said. "This one I'm not going to ask you to name. I'm not going to ask you what's in it. I'm not going to ask you how it was made. I'm going to ask you one thing about it, and the thing I'm going to ask you is the only thing I'm going to ask you tonight, and I'd like you to answer it without thinking too hard." "Okay." "Pick up the glass." Natalie picked up the glass. "Smell it." Natalie smelled it. "Drink it." Natalie drank it. Her eyes closed. Sloane watched her face. She watched the way a single small line at the bridge of her nose softened. She watched the corner of her mouth do a thing that she had not seen the corner of her mouth do all afternoon, which was relax. She watched a woman who had spent the last 40 minutes holding a wine in her mouth like a witness statement, hold a wine in her mouth like a memory. "What does it remind you of?" Sloane said. The eyes stayed closed. "Don't think," Sloane said. "Just—" "My grandfather," Natalie said. She said it very quietly. She said it before she'd had time to stop herself from saying it. She said it with her eyes closed and her glass at her mouth and her shoulders very still. And Sloane, sitting on the edge of the walnut table 18 inches from her right hand, did not move and did not breathe and did not say a single word, because she had spent 11 years getting people to answer questions like this, and she knew what to do when they did, which was nothing. Nothing at all. You did not move. You did not move and you did not breathe and you let the answer land, because the answer was the whole point, and the answer was always, always, the very first thing the person said before they knew they were saying it. Natalie opened her eyes. She set the glass down. "That's number 6, she said. What is it?" "It's number 5. It's number 5, Natalie. The 23. The one I reviewed. I poured you the same wine in 2 different glasses." Natalie stared at her. "The first glass," Sloane said, "was the wine you make? The second glass was the wine you have. They're the same wine. You taste them differently because you know what one of them is, and what one of them is the wine you got reviewed for. And you have not, in 14 months, been able to put a glass of your own, 23, to your mouth without hearing every word that was written about it. That's not? It is. Sloane? Your grandfather is in this wine, Natalie. He's in the bottle. He's been in the bottle this whole time. You've been tasting around him for 14 months because you've been afraid I was right about you, and the joke, my God, the joke is that I was wrong. I wrote 800 words about the wrong thing. The wine isn't afraid. You're afraid. The wine is just waiting. Natalie did not answer. She was looking at the glass in her hand. Her hand was very faintly shaking. The wine in the glass was catching the gold of the pendant light and laying a small wavering coin of it against the inside of her wrist where her pulse was, and Sloane watched the coin tremble, just once, in the soft amber air of the room she had been hired to save, and she thought very quietly in a part of her brain that had nothing to do with wine. Oh. Oh no. I think, Natalie said. What? I think I'd like to drink it again, please. Yes. Slowly. Yes. Could you? What? Could you sit there? While I do it? Yes. She sat on the edge of the walnut table. She did not move. She did not breathe more than she had to. And on the other side of the small precise distance between her right thigh and Natalie Rousseau's right knee, Natalie lifted the glass to her mouth a second time, with her eyes open, and she tasted for the first time in 14 months her own wine. Her hand was steadier on the second sip. It was not yet steady. But it was steadier. That was enough, Sloane thought, for a Saturday in August. That was, in fact, more than enough. She did not say so. She just sat on the table in a charcoal shirt with 3 buttons undone and watched a 40-year-old woman in green silk drink her grandfather's wine in the gold light of the room they had 88 days to save, and she understood, with a clarity she could neither name nor act on, that she was possibly going to be in some trouble before this was through. Chapter 5. By Tuesday morning, Sloane had been on the property for 72 hours and had already moved the cellar program in a way Natalie had been unable to move it in 2 years. This was the first thing Natalie noticed. The second thing Natalie noticed was that Sloane Vega did not appear to own a single article of clothing that had a collar on it after sundown. She came in for breakfast at 7:15 on Tuesday through the back door without knocking, in a soft white Henley with the sleeves pushed up past her elbows and a pair of canvas work pants that had a small tear at the right knee from a thing she had done with a barrel that morning that Natalie had not been there to see. Her hair was wet. She had clearly come straight from the shower at the cottage. She had clearly walked the lavender path between the cottage and the house with her hair wet in the cool of the early morning, and Natalie, looking up from the kitchen island with a mug of coffee halfway to her mouth, had a small mortifying moment in which she registered that the woman smelled faintly like rosemary soap. "Morning," Sloane said, going past her to the coffee pot. "Good morning." "Diego said the malo on the 4-tank finished last night. I'm going to taste through this morning. You want in?" "Yes." 8. "Yes." Sloane poured a mug. She drank half of it standing at the counter, which Natalie had never seen another human being do, not the half the mug standing, but the way Sloane did it, which was unhurried, with both hands wrapped around the mug, with her eyes closed, with a small private sound at the back of her throat that was, Natalie understood, the only piece of Sloane's morning that belonged to Sloane and not to the estate. She finished the coffee. She set the mug in the sink. She looked at Natalie for a half-second longer than the moment required. "You changed your hair," she said. Natalie had not changed her hair. Natalie had, at 6:40 on a Tuesday morning, in a bathroom mirror, in a robe, taken her hair down and put it back up in a different clip than the one she usually used, and she had done it without thinking, and then had looked at herself in the mirror and had sat down on the edge of the tub and said out loud, to nobody, "Natalie, you are 40 years old. Stop it." She had not stopped it. The clip was still in. "No," she said. Sloane said. She left. Natalie sat at the island with both hands flat on the cold stone for a count of 10. The cellar at 8 in the morning was 48 degrees and smelled the way a cellar smelled in late August, which was the smell of cold concrete, oak, fermenting fruit, the very faint sour bright top note of malolactic conversion still finishing on the Chardonnay and Diego's coffee. Diego had been in for 2 hours already. Diego came in at 6. Diego had been coming in at 6 since 2003. "Boss," Diego said when Natalie came down the steps. "Diego." "She's already in tank 4. "All right." "She's good," Diego said. Natalie looked at him. Diego was, on the topic of consultants, the most economical man she had ever worked with. He had, in 19 years, said she's good about exactly 2 consultants, and the other one had been a woman from Davis named Kim, who had walked Natalie through the conversion to dry farming Block 7 in 2014, and had been, in retrospect, the only outside hire her grandfather had ever fully approved of from his hospital bed. "All right," Natalie said. She walked back through the cellar to the 4-tank. Sloane was up on the catwalk with a thief and a glass, drawing wine. She had her hair in a low ponytail now, which she had done while Natalie had been 3 minutes behind her, and the Henley sleeves were still pushed past her elbows, and the small leaf tattoo on the inside of her left wrist was visible against the steel rail when she leaned out over the tank, and Natalie, climbing the catwalk steps in flats that had not been chosen for catwalks, watched the line of Sloane's back from below for the 4 steps it took to get up and decided to never think about that line again for the rest of the morning. She failed at this by the second sip of wine. They worked through the morning. They worked through the afternoon. They tasted 4 tanks and 3 barrels, and Sloane took notes in a small black notebook in a left-handed scrawl that Natalie could not read. And at 12:40 Marisol came down with 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and shoved them at the two of them with a eat, and they ate them sitting on a stack of empty pallets in the corner of the cellar with their feet on the cold concrete and the cellar lights humming over their heads, and Sloane said, "The Chardonnay finishing on the 4 tank. You called the Malo last week. How? How? The smell? You can smell Malo through a closed tank." Through a closed tank, Natalie. I just can. I always have. Sloane said and ate her sandwich. Natalie ate hers. The cold of the concrete had come up through the soles of the flats into her feet and was doing a slow, bracing thing to her ankles. She was eating a turkey sandwich on Marisol's bread next to a woman in a white Henley with a small leaf on the inside of her left wrist, who had, in the last 6 minutes, said him in 3 different intonations, and had, in the last 72 hours, called her by her first name approximately 40 times. She was not used to the sound of her own name. She was discovering at 40, almost embarrassingly susceptible to the sound of her own name in a low voice. "What?" "Nothing," she said. "You were looking at me." "I wasn't." "You were." "I was thinking. About 4 tank. Whether we should bottle it separately." "What?" "Nothing." "You said at me." "I did." "In a tone." "Did I?" "Sloane?" The corner of Sloane's mouth did the thing it did. She drank the last sip of her water. She balled the wax paper into a small, neat ball, and stood up and brushed the crumbs off her thighs, and looked down at Natalie on the pallet with the sun coming in the high cellar window behind her, and she said easy, friendly, with absolutely no edge whatsoever. "You'll have to tell me sometime, Natalie." "Tell you what?" "What you're actually thinking when you go quiet like that." Not now. Sometime." She walked off down the cellar to the 2 tank, the wax paper in her hand, the ponytail swinging once at her back, and Natalie sat on the pallet with her sandwich and a lap full of crumbs, and an entire quiet cellar full of fermenting wine, and she put her face in her hands for the count of 3, and she got up. In the late afternoon, Jamie came up from the tasting room. Jamie was in their usual black trousers, a soft mock neck, the little gold hoop in their right ear, the clipboard. They had been at the estate for 3 years. They were 28. They were the only person in Sonoma County, Natalie was fairly certain, who could open a tasting room shift at 6:30 in the morning, run a 100-person event at 6 in the evening, and still be the most composed person in any given room they walked into. Jamie had been hired by Marisol over Natalie's objections in 2022, and Natalie had been wrong, and she knew it, and Jamie knew she knew it, which was the basis of their entire functional working relationship. "Boss. Jamie. I have the calendar through October. Bring it. And I have a question. Bring that too." Jamie set the clipboard on the kitchen island, and then, because Jamie had a sense of theater and used it sparingly and well, did not open it for a moment. "How is your sommelier?" they said. "She is." Don't at me, Jamie. I get enough of that today." "Do you?" "Jamie. I just asked a question." "You asked it in a tone." "I have many tones." "This one," Natalie said, "is the one I am asking you not to use." "Boss." "What?" Jamie opened the clipboard. They walked Natalie through October. There was a Sunday brunch event for a Healdsburg foodie group, 2 private tastings, one a wine club, one a corporate retreat that had paid in March and could not be rescheduled, a bridal shower the second Saturday, 12 guests, Jamie said, "Yes, I know," with a small look, and the gala, which was the last Saturday of the month, October 25th, 6 days before the bank deadline. The gala was the gala. The gala had, currently, 57 RSVPs out of a target of 120. We're behind, Natalie said. We're behind on the RSVPs. We're not behind on the people who matter. The 3 distributors you wanted are all in. 2 of the 4 press, including, Jamie checked the clipboard, Theo Park. Natalie's stomach did a small, unannounced thing. Theo Park. Wine spectator? Yes. He's coming to the gala. He's coming to the gala. That's Jamie, how did we get him? Jamie looked at her. Boss, they said. What? He wrote to me on Monday morning at 6 a.m. Pacific. He said, and I am quoting, I understand my favorite person in the wine world has been hired to save your bacon. Please do not RSVP me through the standard system, just get me a good seat. Oh. His favorite person in the wine world. Yes, His favorite person in the wine world is sleeping in our cottage. Jamie. I'm just saying. Don't just say. I'm just saying, boss, that there are 11 RSVPs in the inbox dated Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning that I can directly trace to her name being on the press release we sent on Sunday. Natalie was standing at the island with her right hand pressed flat to the stone and her left hand around her water glass, and she registered, not breathing at quite the rate at which she normally breathed. All right, she said. All right. Jamie. Don't. Jamie smiled. It was a small, dry smile that Jamie used very seldom, and that Natalie had seen in 3 years, maybe 4 times. They closed the clipboard. I like her, they said. You've spoken to her once. Twice. We had coffee yesterday. You had. She came up at 7:30 yesterday morning and asked me to walk her through the events calendar, which, Jamie's eyebrow went up the merciful 1/4 inch, is the first time in 3 years that any consultant on this property has asked me to walk them through the events calendar. Oh. Jamie? She also asked me, Jamie said, lifting the clipboard, what your favorite wine on the list is. Natalie went very still. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know, because I don't, and that nobody else who works here knows either, because nobody knows. Boss. I have worked for you for 3 years, and I do not today, sitting here on a Tuesday, know what wine in our own cellar you love. Jamie. She didn't say anything to that. She just wrote something in her notebook. Jamie tucked the clipboard under their arm. Anyway. The favorite person in the wine world. The cottage. The 11 RSVPs. I'm going. Have a good evening, boss. They walked out. Natalie did not move for a long minute. She was in the kitchen at 8:40. She had not meant to be in the kitchen at 8:40. She had meant to be in her office on the 2nd floor, working through a contract for the gala caterer, and she had instead been at her desk for 40 minutes pretending to read the contract, and she had instead come downstairs to make herself a cup of tea, and the tea was on the counter going cold, and she was at the kitchen window holding nothing, looking out into the long blue dusk over the rows. Sloane was on the path. Not coming up. Standing. She was about 30 feet from the back of the house, stopped on the gravel, leaning against the corner of the fence post at the end of the lavender path, with one boot crossed over the other, her hands in her pockets, looking out west into the rows. She was, Natalie could see from the angle in the dark, talking. Not to herself. To Diego. Diego had come up from the cellar and stopped at the same fence post on his way home, the way he sometimes did, and the 2 of them were standing there in the soft blue light with their breath visible just barely against the cooling air, and Sloane said something Natalie could not hear, and Diego of the 6 a.m. arrivals, the one she's good, the man who had not in 19 years laughed in front of Natalie, laughed once, low and short and surprised, and Sloane, watching him do it, smiled. It was a real smile. It was not the corner of the mouth thing. It was not the working smile she wore in the tasting room, or the small private one she had given Natalie this morning when she'd said, "You'll have to tell me sometime." It was a smile a woman made when she had said a thing to a man she had known for 72 hours and had made him laugh on a fence post at the end of a long Tuesday, and it took up her whole face, and her whole face, this was the part Natalie was not prepared for, was in the long blue dusk in profile, in repose, in a moment that did not belong to Natalie and was not for Natalie and had not been arranged for Natalie's benefit, the most beautiful face Natalie had looked at in 20 years. She stood at the kitchen window with her hand on the sill. She felt, in a way that was almost clinical, the precise place inside her chest where something that had been folded up small for 2 decades got slightly, in the smallest possible amount, unfolded. It was not, she registered with the half of her brain that was still functioning, a large thing. It was the corner of a thing. She watched Sloane laugh at something Diego said back. She watched Diego clap her on the shoulder briefly and walk on toward the truck. She watched Sloane stand alone at the fence post for another full minute, looking out at the rows, with her hands in her pockets, and her ponytail moving very slightly in the cool that came off the river at this hour, and she watched Sloane turn as if she had felt something behind her, and look at the kitchen window. Their eyes met across 30 feet of blue dusk and a pane of glass. Sloane did not move. Sloane did not smile. Sloane just looked at her for a second, 2, 3, and then she did a thing with her chin, very small, almost not a thing, the smallest possible nod a person could give another person, and she turned, and she walked the rest of the way down the lavender path to the cottage, and the cottage door closed behind her, and the cottage light came on a moment later in the kitchen window of the cottage. Natalie stood at the sink for a long time. Her tea had gone cold. She did not warm it. She poured it down the drain. She rinsed the cup. She set it in the rack. She stood with her hands flat on the cold edge of the sink, and she said out loud in her own kitchen, in a voice she could only barely hear, "Oh, Natalie." She turned out the kitchen light. She went up the stairs in the dark. Chapter 6. Sloane brought it up at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon because she had decided, by Wednesday night at the cottage with a glass of water and her notebook, that there was no clean version of bringing it up. The fight was going to happen. She was, as a professional matter, in favor of getting fights out of the way before they had been allowed to ferment. She brought it up in the tasting room, because the tasting room was Natalie's neutral ground, and she brought it up with Marisol present, because Marisol was the only person on the property whose presence kept Natalie from leaving a room. "I want to pull the 24 Pinot off the standard tier." She had said it the way she said all her opening offers, flat, conversational, with no editorial, and she watched Natalie hear it. "I'm sorry," Natalie said. "I want to pull it off the standard tier. I want to rebottle the 4 tank as a single Vineyard reserve and price it at $90. We hold 60 cases for direct, 15 for the wine club at allocation. The rest splits between Theo's column placement and the 3 distributors who've already RSVP'd. We don't release it to the standard list. The standard tier this year is the 2 tank only. The 4 tank. The 4 tank. Block 7. Block 7. A small tight pause. Marisol was sitting on the high stool at the bar with her arms folded. Marisol had been sitting on that stool, in that position, for most of the conversations that had mattered in this room since 2003. "No," Natalie said. "Natalie." "No." "Sloane." "No." "Hear me out. Block 7 has been the standard Pinot for 40 years. 4 decades. My grandfather wrote about it. He gave a speech about it. There is a plaque, Sloane, there is a brass plaque in the entry of this room about the philosophy of putting your best fruit into your most accessible bottle. We don't reserve our soul, it says. You can go read it, it's 20 feet from where you were standing. I read it on Sunday. Then? I read it twice on Sunday. It's a beautiful plaque. Then why? Because your grandfather wrote that plaque in 1979, Sloane said, when this estate had no debt, 14 acres, 3 employees, and a 10,000 case ceiling on what your standard tier could move at $28 a bottle. The plaque was the right philosophy for the estate that existed in 1979. It is not the right philosophy for the estate that exists in 2025. The estate that exists in 2025 has 86 days to clear $2.4 million of bridge financing and a wine on the four tank that is, she paused, the best young Pinot I have tasted on the West Coast in 5 years. Sloane? I'm telling you what it is. The four tank is going to be a wine that people drive here for. It is going to be a wine that wins the gold at the Pacific Rim next August, and gets a 96 in Spectator, and gets pulled by every sommelier in San Francisco for their By the Glass program at $130 a pour. It is the wine that is going to put your name back in print as something other than the woman who held back her 23. And you want to put it in a $38 bottle. It's the standard tier. It is too good for the standard tier. There is no such thing as too good for the. There absolutely is. You know there is. You are standing here with a degree in this from one of the 3 best programs in this country, and you are telling me, with a straight face, that there is no such thing as a wine being too good for a $38 bottle. Listen to yourself. Natalie. This is what we do, Sloane. We don't sit on our best fruit and dress it up and put a ribbon on it and charge $90 to people who aren't going to be able to taste the difference between it and the four tank from down the road. We put it in a $38 bottle and we let people who love wine drink it. That's the whole point. It's the whole point of the. That is why you are broke. The words sat in the room. Sloane heard herself say them. She had not, in 11 years, said them quite so cleanly to a client. She had said it in worse rooms and to worse people. She had not said it to a person with a hand pressed flat to a zinc bar and a brass plaque about her grandfather 20 feet behind her shoulder. Marisol on the stool did not move. "Get out," Natalie said very quietly. "Natalie. Get out of my room. Look. Get out of my room, Sloane." Sloane put down her notebook. She had not realized she was holding it. She set it on the walnut table, closed, neat, and she walked without hurrying past Natalie, past Marisol, past the brass plaque, and out the door of the tasting room into the late afternoon. She did not look back. She did not need to. She walked. She walked the lavender path past the cottage. She kept walking. She walked the long slope down past Block 4 and along the dirt access road that ran the southern fence line, and she walked until the buildings of the estate were small behind her and the only thing in front of her was Block 7 in the long gold of the 4:30 sun, and she stopped at the head of the rows and stood there with her hands on her hips, and she breathed in through her nose, and she said out loud to nobody, "Vega. You are an idiot." She said it conversationally. She said it the way she would have said it to Theo on the phone at midnight, with affection. Then she walked back to the cottage. She made herself a cup of coffee. She sat on the screen porch of the cottage in a chair that faced east into the rows, with the coffee on the floor at her feet and her notebook on her thigh, and she opened the notebook to a clean page, and she wrote in a left-handed scrawl that nobody but her had ever read. She was right. You were also right. Both of you can be right at the same time. You know how to make this work. Stop. She closed the notebook. She drank the coffee. She watched the light go. She did not see Natalie at dinner. She did not see Marisol either. The estate at this hour did the thing it did, which was, it emptied. Diego's truck went down the drive at 6. The kitchen light came on in the main house at 7 and went off at 7:40. The lavender path was empty. The windows of the second floor of the main house were all of them dark. She made herself a sandwich at the cottage at 8. She ate half of it. She poured a glass of the 4 tank. Diego had given her a sample bottle 2 days ago in a pulled cork half, and she drank it slowly, on the porch in the dark, with her bare feet up on the rail and the cricket noise coming up from the rows and waves. By 10, she had finished the bottle. By 11, she had not slept. By 11:40, she had decided that she was going to walk down the rows of Block 7 in the dark, by herself, without her phone, the way she had walked the rows of Block 7 in the light 40 hours into the contract, because there was a thing she did when she was thinking about a wine, which was, she walked the vines that had made it, and she had made a decision earlier in the evening which she now needed to reverse, and the rows were the place she did that. She put on her boots. She went out. The night was cooler than she had expected. The river cool came up the slope at this hour and settled in the rows like something kept in a cellar, and she walked with her hands in her pockets, the long slow slope down past Block 4 and along the access road and to the head of Block 7, and she stood there for a moment and listened, and there was nothing, just cricket, just the very far hum of a tractor over on someone else's land, just her own breath, and she walked into the rows. She walked 4 rows in. She stopped. There was a person at the end of the row. A woman, small in the dark, sitting on the dust between 2 vines with her knees drawn up and her arms around them, in a sweater that was too big for her, with her hair down and her feet bare. Sloane stopped walking. She stood there for a count of 2 in the dark. Then she walked, slowly, the rest of the way down the row, with her boots quiet in the dust, until she was 8 feet from where Natalie Rousseau was, sitting on the ground in her grandfather's vineyard at 11:50 on a Thursday in August in a sweater she had clearly owned for 15 years. "Hi," she said quietly. Natalie did not look up. Sloane sat down. Not next to her. Across the row from her, with her back against the trunk of the vine on the opposite side, knees up, hands loose between them. She did not say anything. She had said enough things this afternoon. She let the silence sit. After a while, she did not know how long, she had never been good at telling time in a vineyard at night, Natalie said into her knees. "You weren't wrong." I know you weren't wrong, Sloane. I knew it when you said it. I have known it for 2 years. I have known we cannot keep. I know. I just hated to hear it in my room. I know. I want you to know, also, that I'm going to keep being like that. About things. I'm going to walk out of rooms. I'm going to. You want to walk out of rooms, walk out of rooms. You've earned it. A small laugh, short, watery. Natalie pressed the heel of her hand into her eye. Don't be charming at me. I'm not being charming. You are. Walk out of rooms, you've earned it. You're being charming. That's just the way I talk, Natalie. I know. I'm sorry I said it that way. What way? That's why you're broke. In the room. In front of Marisol. With the plaque. I should have said the same thing differently. It wasn't a fair fight. I came at you with the version of it that was going to land hardest. A pause. Why, Natalie said. Why what? Why did you come at me with the version that was going to land hardest? A longer pause. Sloane looked at her, across the dirt of the row in the dark in the sweater. She thought about lying. She had been lying about why she said hard things to women for a number of years, and she was, most of the time, very good at it. She found, sitting under the old vine in the cool that came off the river at this hour, that she was, tonight, slightly out of practice. Because I needed you to hear it, she said. And I knew the soft version wouldn't get through. And I wanted to be done. Quickly. I didn't want to have it twice. Why? Why what? Why didn't you want to have it twice? Sloane looked at the vine on Natalie's side. She looked at Natalie's bare feet in the dust. She looked at the small place at the side of Natalie's neck, where the sweater had pulled away from the line of her throat. She looked at the dark. I don't know, she said. Sloane? I don't, Natalie. All right. A long quiet. I'm going to do it, Natalie said. The reserve. The 4-tank. Bottle it separately, $90, 60 cases for direct, 15 for the club, the rest for distribution and press. I want the brass plaque to stay on the wall, and I want, when we write the launch copy, I want one line in there about the philosophy, about the change. Honest. Not flowery. In 2025, we made an exception. Something. We can workshop it. All right. Sloane, I'm not capitulating to you. I want to be clear about that. I'm doing it because you are right, and I have known you are right for a year and a half, and I needed someone to walk into my tasting room and say it. So thank you for that. But I am not capitulating to you. Noted. You can put that in your notebook. I will. Don't write capitulated. I won't. Right. What? Decided, Natalie said. Sloane felt something move low behind her sternum. Decided, she said. Okay. They walked back together. They did not touch. They walked the long, slow slope up from Block 7 in the dark, side by side, with the cricket noise rising and falling in the rows around them, and Natalie was barefoot the whole way, with her boots in one hand and her sweater sleeves pulled down over her wrists, and Sloane, walking on her left, kept her hands in her pockets the whole 100 yards, because if she did not keep her hands in her pockets, she understood with some embarrassment, going to do something stupid with them. Like reach for Natalie's free hand. Like brush her thumb across the inside of Natalie's wrist where her pulse would be. Like she thought anything. Any of the things her hands had done in 11 years without asking permission of the rest of her, that she did not, for the first time in 11 years, want to do without asking. So she kept them in her pockets. They reached the back porch. Natalie stopped at the steps. She turned to face her. The porch light was off. The kitchen light was off. The only light was the half-moon coming over the ridge to the east, and a small blue thing from the cottage windows down the path. Good night, Sloane, Natalie said. Good night, Natalie. Thank you for tonight. For what? For coming down. To the rose. You didn't know I was there. No. You came down anyway. Yes. Natalie looked at her in the dark for a count Sloane did not bother to take. Then she turned and went up the porch steps and into the house, and the door closed behind her, and Sloane stood at the bottom of the porch with her hands in her pockets for a moment after the door had closed, and a moment after the light in the second floor had come on, and a moment after that, and she walked slowly with her boots quiet on the gravel the 140 feet down the lavender path to the cottage, and she went inside. She did not turn on the light. She sat on the edge of the bed in the cottage at 12:40 in the morning with her boots still on and her hands flat on her thighs and her back to the open window with the cool coming in off the rose, and she said to herself in the dark, in a voice she could only barely hear, Vega. You are in trouble. She took her boots off. She did not sleep for a long time. Chapter 7. It was Saturday again. Natalie marked time, that first stretch on the property, by Saturdays. Sloane had arrived on a Saturday. The first tasting had been a Saturday. The fight in the rose had been Thursday, but Natalie was, in her head, already grouping it under the heading of the second Saturday week, because she had begun to organize her calendar, without entirely registering that she had begun to do so, around the rhythm of a woman who had been on the property for 13 days. It was Saturday at 6 p.m. when Sloane said easily across the kitchen island where they had been working through a draft of the launch copy for the new reserve. Tonight I want to do another tasting. All right. Differently. Differently how? You'll see. Sloane? You'll see, Natalie. Natalie set down the pen. Could you, she said, not? Could you just tell me what we are doing in my own room, in my own house, with my own wine, like a professional consultant who is being paid by the hour instead of a whatever you're being? Sloane looked up from the laptop. She had been reading for the last 40 minutes, in a pair of black-rimmed reading glasses Natalie had not previously known she owned. The glasses were, Natalie had been refusing to acknowledge the glasses, a new and specific problem. What am I being? Sloane said. Difficult. You're laughing. I'm not laughing. You're laughing. Internally. How would you know? I can see it on your face. That is alarming, Sloane said, and we will have to talk about that later. Tasting room. 8 o'clock. Where's something? She paused and then, with a deliberate small lift at the corner of her mouth, comfortable. Comfortable. Sloane? You'll see. She closed the laptop. She took the glasses off. She left. Natalie sat at the island for a long minute, with her hand flat on the stone. She went upstairs. She did not change her clothes 3 times. She changed them 4. The tasting room at 8 Sloane had clearly been in there for an hour again, the way she had been on the first Saturday, been remade. The pendant lights were off. All of them. The only light in the room was a long row of beeswax tapers in low brass holders down the center of the walnut table, and a single candle on the bar, which threw a soft warm wash up the back wall that turned the original stone a color Natalie had not, in 19 years, seen the original stone be. She had not known the room was capable of looking like this. She had not known, more accurately, that anyone knew the room was capable of looking like this, because she herself had lit the room 10,000 times in 2 decades and had never lit it in candles. Sloane was at the bar. Sloane was, and this was the part Natalie had to take in slowly in pieces, because she could not take it in all at once, in a black silk shirt. The shirt was not fancy. It was not formal. It was a soft black silk button-down, the sleeves rolled twice, 3 buttons undone, tucked into dark jeans and the same brown boots, and the silk caught the candlelight along the line of her shoulder when she moved, and the line of her shoulder was, Natalie discovered in real time in the doorway, a line she was going to have a problem with. Hi, Sloane said. Hi. Come in. Close the door behind you. Natalie closed the door behind her. What are we drinking? One thing. One thing. One bottle. One glass. It's an experiment. All right. Sit down. Natalie sat. Not in her chair. Not in the chair across from it. In the chair to the left of her usual chair, the one she had never sat in before, because she had no reason to, because she had been sitting in the same chair in this room for 19 years. Sloane had pulled the chair out for her 2 inches. The chair was angled very slightly away from the table and toward the bar. Sloane brought the bottle. It was, Natalie saw the shape of it in the candlelight before she saw the label, one of her own. Older. The label was foxed at the corners. The capsule had been cut once long ago and resealed. This is? Yes. Where did you? Diego pulled it for me yesterday. This is? It's the 04. That's my grandfather's. It's your grandfather's last vintage. Yes. Natalie sat very still. The 04 had not been opened in this room since 2008. There were, in the rack behind the bar, 9 bottles of it left, and the 9 bottles of it had, by long, unspoken agreement, in the way that families agreed about things they did not need to say out loud, been considered untouchable. 9 bottles of him. They got opened, sometimes, at funerals, at weddings, at the closings of years. They had not been opened on a Saturday in August. Not once. Sloane, she said. I know. You can't. I asked Marisol on Wednesday. You? I asked her if I could pull one for you. She said yes. She also said, Sloane said softer, about damn time. Natalie pressed her palm flat against the walnut. The wine came out of the bottle the color of garnet, which was the color it was supposed to be at 21 years old, and the room filled very slowly with a smell that Natalie had not smelled in 17 years. Leather, dried cherry, the oddly specific, mushroomy depth of a Russian river Pinot in its 3rd decade, and something else underneath, something the wine had been carrying since 2004 that was not actually in the wine, that was in her, which was the smell of her grandfather's hand on the back of her neck on the porch in October, when she had been 20. Oh, she said. Sloane? I know. This is? I know. Sloane poured 1 glass. 1. A small burgundy bowl, 2 ounces. She set the glass on the walnut in front of Natalie, and she did not pour herself one, and she did not sit down across from her. She walked, with the bottle still in her hand, around the table to Natalie's side, and she set the bottle down on the walnut to Natalie's right, and she did the thing Natalie had been waiting all evening for her to do without admitting she had been waiting for her to do it, which was, she came in close. She did not touch her. She came around behind Natalie's chair, and she put one hand on the high back of it, Natalie's vinegar-soft old chair, the back warm from her own back, and she leaned lightly against the wood, and she said low near the right side of Natalie's head, "Pick up the glass." Natalie picked up the glass. Her hand was already not steady. "Hold the stem with your right hand," Sloane said. "Slow. Don't tip it." "All right. Close your eyes." "Sloane?" "Close them." Natalie closed her eyes. The room went black behind her eyelids. She could feel the candle warmth on her cheek from the table. She could feel the cool of the silk of her own blouse where it lay against her collarbone, and she could feel, with a clarity she was unprepared for, the warmth of another body about a hand width behind her right shoulder, breathing very evenly. She could not see Sloane. She could only smell her, faintly, the rosemary soap from the cottage shower, the very faint clean of laundered cotton, the wine on her breath from where she had clearly tasted from the bottle herself before bringing it to Natalie. She had tasted it. She had tasted Natalie's grandfather's wine before Natalie had. She had brought it down from the rack. She had pulled the cork. She had checked it. She had decided in the cottage, alone, that it was right, and she had brought it to Natalie tonight, and she had not poured herself a glass. "What do you smell?" Sloane said low, very close to her right ear. "Cherry. Dried. Leather. There's a place under it that's mushroom, but it's clean mushroom, it's not. Not under the porch. Not under the porch. The way the rooms in the back of the cellar smell in March." "And what?" "My grandfather's hand." A small pause. "Your grandfather's hand," Sloane said very softly. "On the back of my neck. October. I was 20. I haven't smelled it since." "Since when?" "Since the funeral." The hand that was not on the back of her chair came forward. Natalie heard the small, soft movement of it. She felt it before it landed, in the way the air moved against the side of her wrist, and then Sloane's two fingers, index, middle, light, dry, warm, settled on the inside of her right wrist where the pulse was, and they did not move, and they did not press, and they did not stroke, they just rested there, against her pulse, against the place she had been 112 beats a minute since she had walked into the room. "There," Sloane said. "What?" "That's the first information." "That's where you start, Natalie." Natalie made a small sound. It was not, she registered with a small mortification, in the same instant she made it, a sound she had ever heard come out of her mouth in 19 years in this room. It was a quiet, involuntary thing, half a breath, that left her on a syllable that was almost her grandfather's name, and almost something else. Sloane heard it. Sloane did not move. "Drink the wine," Sloane said. Slowly. Natalie drank the wine. She drank a small mouthful. She held it on her tongue. She held it against the roof of her mouth, the way her grandfather had taught her at 13, the way she had taught herself at 20, the way she understood with a strange small lurch, forgotten to do sometime in the last decade, in the years she had been making polite and well-mannered and afraid wine at the bottom of a long oak-lined drive, and the wine bloomed across the back of her tongue with the warmth of all 21 years of itself, and she had, in that moment, with two fingers resting on her pulse, the first unmediated sensory experience she could recall having had in this room since 2008. Her pulse under Sloane's fingers jumped. She felt Sloane feel it. She heard, very quietly behind her, Sloane breathe in. "What does it taste like?" Sloane said very low. "Rain," Natalie said. She said it before she had thought about it. She said it because it was the word. She said it because the wine, for one small, specific second on the back of her tongue, had tasted like the smell of rain on hot summer dust, like the place on the porch where the rain came off the eaves and hit the boards in October, like home, like the only thing she had wanted for the last 17 years of her life and had not let herself ask for. And Sloane, behind her shoulder with 2 fingers on her pulse, said in a voice that was almost not there, "Now we have something to work with." The fingers stayed. For 1 beat. 2. 3. Natalie's eyes were still closed. She could feel, through the thin skin of the inside of her wrist, in a way she had never felt anything in her life, the answering heartbeat of the woman behind her chair, transmitted through 2 fingers and a half-inch of air, and it was, she registered with absolute clarity in the candlelight of her own tasting room on a Saturday in August at 40 years old, fast. Not as fast as hers, but fast. Faster than the heartbeat of a working sommelier on her 13th night of a contract had any reasonable cause to be. Sloane took her fingers off. She did it slowly. She did it the way you took your hand off a glass you did not want to spill. The fingers went, and a small piece of warmth went with them, and Natalie in the chair with her eyes still closed felt the absence of the 2 fingers as a thing distinct from the absence of any other touch she had felt in her life. "Open your eyes," Sloane said. Natalie opened her eyes. Sloane was standing at the side of the chair now, 3 feet back with her hands in her jeans pockets. The black silk shirt caught the candlelight along the line of the shoulder again. Her face was, Natalie understood, looking up at her, not in any way she had ever seen, composed. The composure she had been carrying for 13 days was, in the candlelight, gone. She was just a woman in a black silk shirt looking down at another woman in a chair with a glass of wine in her hand, and her eyes were doing a thing they had not done before, which was, they were not hiding. Natalie said. "You don't have to say anything." You did the work tonight, Natalie. That was the work. Sloane? I'm going to step back now. Sloane? I'm going to step back, and I'm going to walk to the bar, and I'm going to pour myself a glass of this wine, and we're going to drink the rest of the bottle the way 2 adults drink a bottle of Pinot in a tasting room on a Saturday night. All right? That's what we're going to do. All right. Good. She stepped back. She walked to the bar. She poured herself a glass of the 04 with a hand that was, Natalie could see even at 15 feet, even in candlelight, not quite steady, and she came back to the table, and she sat down, finally, in the chair across from Natalie's, and she took a long, slow sip of her own glass with her eyes closed, and Natalie watched her do it, and she watched her swallow, and she watched her open her eyes. All right, Sloane said. Her voice was even. What did your grandfather pour this with? She said. Veal, Natalie said. He poured it with veal. With a wild mushroom thing my mother used to make it. He said. Tell me. He said Pinot at this age was a wine you put next to something with bones in it. So you had to chew while you drank. He said. What? He said it would teach you patience. The chewing. A long quiet. Natalie was, she noticed, not crying. She was very close to a thing that was not crying. Her wine glass was in her hand, very still, because her hand had, finally, 17 minutes after Sloane had taken her fingers off her wrist, stopped shaking. We are putting it on the gala menu, Sloane said. What? The veal. The mushroom thing. Your mother's. We are putting it on the gala menu with this wine, the 04, 2 bottles, 8 ounces a guest, by the glass for the head table. Sloane? We are doing it. I will fight your mother for the recipe. Sloane? That is, you can't. I can. We are. We have 9 bottles. We will have 7. Sloane? Write it down, Natalie. Pen. Paper. You have a pen on the bar. Go. Natalie got up. She went to the bar. She came back with the pen and the small spiral notebook Sloane had been using since Tuesday, and she sat back down in the chair to the left of her usual chair, and she wrote in her own careful hand on the next clean page of Sloane's notebook. Gala veal with mushroom, 04 head table, 2 BTLS. Then she wrote, on the line below it before she could stop herself. Decided. Sloane read it upside down across the table. She did not say anything. The corner of her mouth did the thing it did. Natalie pushed the notebook back across the walnut to Sloane's side. They drank the rest of the bottle. They did not, for the rest of the evening, talk about wine. It was almost 12 when Sloane stood up. She left the empty bottle on the bar, she did not put it back in the rack, and she said, "Good night, Natalie," and Natalie said, "Good night, Sloane," and Sloane walked, in the black silk shirt and the candlelight, out of the tasting room and across the gravel and down the lavender path to the cottage, and Natalie sat alone at the walnut table for a long time after the door had closed. She did not move for 10 minutes. She put her hand on the inside of her own right wrist, and she pressed 2 fingers there, against her own pulse, and she sat in the dark room and she felt her own heartbeat, and it was, she registered with a clinical and absolute clarity she had not had about her own body in some time. Still fast. Still fast at midnight. Still fast 40 minutes after the woman who had put her 2 fingers there had taken them off. Natalie sat at the walnut table in the candlelight in her grandfather's tasting room, with 2 of her own fingers on her own wrist, and she said out loud in a whisper, in a voice that was almost not a voice. "Oh." She blew out the candles. She walked alone in the dark, the 200 feet up the gravel path from the tasting room to the back porch, with her hand pressed flat over the place on her wrist where Sloane's fingers had been, and she went up the stairs in the dark, and she shut the bedroom door behind her, and she stood in the middle of her own bedroom for a long minute with her back against the door. She did not turn on the light. She did not for a very long time move. Chapter 8. The distributor lunch was a Wednesday. Sloane had been planning the distributor lunch for 6 days. She had picked the date, a Wednesday at 1, for the same reason she picked every distributor lunch she had ever planned for a Wednesday at 1, which was that the kind of distributor she wanted on the gala order sheet was the kind of distributor who had finished his Tuesday hangover by noon Wednesday and had not yet started thinking about Thursday, and would therefore arrive at 1 o'clock willing to be surprised. 6 men. 3 women. 1 vegetarian. 1 who would say just a small pour, "I'm driving," and then drink the small pour and ask casually if there was any of that left, every time, the way that one always did. She had run lunches like this, give or take 400 times. She had not, in any of those 400, been working a room for a winemaker who had spent the previous Saturday night with 2 of Sloane's fingers on her pulse. This was a complication. She had decided in the cottage on Sunday morning, with a cup of coffee on the screen porch and her notebook on her knee, that the complication was not a problem so long as she did not allow it to become one. She was very good at this. She had been, in 11 years, a professional in the kitchens and tasting rooms and cellars of 3 dozen estates, and there had been, she would freely admit to Theo, on a rooftop in Manhattan, and to herself, alone in a Bronco at a rest stop on I-5, and to nobody else, ever, a small but non-zero number of those estates at which she had also been simultaneously intimately involved with a member of the staff. This had never once impacted her professional output. She knew exactly how to do her job in a room with a woman she was sleeping with. She knew how to do it better, in fact, when the room had a woman she was sleeping with in it. The issue she had registered on Sunday morning at the cottage with the coffee on her knee was that she was not sleeping with Natalie Rousseau. She had put 2 fingers on Natalie Rousseau's pulse for 11 seconds in candlelight on Saturday night, and she was now on Wednesday morning 4 days later at 9:15 in the tasting room, working through the seating chart for lunch, and she had been hearing for 96 straight hours in her head like a small unwanted song Natalie's voice say the word rain. That's the first information. That's where you start, Natalie. She had been, she would freely admit to Theo, if Theo had been in the room, slightly less professional with the 4-tank in the cellar all of Monday and Tuesday than she was usually with a 4-tank in a cellar on a Monday and a Tuesday. Diego had twice asked her if she was all right. She had said yes, Diego, both times, and Diego had said both times, and on Tuesday evening on his way out the door, Diego had said over his shoulder in Spanish that Sloane mostly understood. "You sleep, mija." She had not slept particularly well. She had, on Tuesday night at the cottage, put a glass of cold water on the floor by the bed and lain on top of the covers in her boxers and a tank top with the windows open and the cool coming in off the rose, and she had, very deliberately, not thought about the inside of Natalie Rousseau's wrist, and the not thinking about it had been, by midnight, more thinking about it than she had done about anything in some time. She had thought briefly, around 2 a.m., about leaving the contract. She had thought about it the way she had thought about it once before, 22 months ago in Healdsburg, with a sous chef whose name she could no longer remember without effort, and she had, on Tuesday night in the cottage, gotten up and gone to the kitchen and poured the glass of water out into the sink and said out loud to her own reflection in the dark window, "Vega, you took the contract. You finished the contract." And then, more quietly, "You can want a thing and finish a contract." She had gone back to bed. She had not slept until 4. Natalie came down to the tasting room at 11:30 on Wednesday in a navy linen dress Sloane had not seen her wear before, and Sloane registered the dress in her peripheral vision in one full sweep without turning her head, and she registered also the small specific way the line of the navy linen sat on Natalie's collarbone, and she registered also the way Natalie's hair had been put up not in the usual clip but in a different one, lower, looser, more deliberate was the word, and she registered finally that she had registered all of this in approximately a second and a half, and she said easily, with her whole face composed, in the voice she had used at 400 distributor lunches in 11 years. "You're early." That's good. I want to walk you through the seating before they get here." "All right." "You're at the head." "Sloane?" "You're at the head, Natalie. They came to meet you. The whole point of today is that they leave saying I had lunch with Natalie Rousseau. I'm at the foot. I run the room from the foot. You receive the room from the head. We've talked about this." "All right. Marisol is on your left. Jamie is on your right. The Pacific Coast guy, Bill, is 2 seats down on your left, because he likes Marisol and Marisol can handle him." "All right. Natalie." "What?" "Look at me." Natalie looked at her. Sloane held the look for a half-second too long. She had not, she registered with mild surprise, in the half-second, meant to hold it for a half-second too long. Natalie's face did not change. The pulse at the side of her throat, against the navy linen, did. Sloane saw it. Sloane, with the part of her brain that was functioning, did not let the corner of her mouth do the thing. "You're going to be very good today," she said. "Sloane? You're going to be excellent, in fact, because the only thing you have to do today is be a person who loves her own wine in front of 9 other people who would like to be persuaded to love it also, and we already established on Saturday night that you are perfectly capable of being a person who loves her own wine. Yes?" A pause. "Yes." "All right. All right. Go check the kitchen with Marisol. The veal is the only thing I'm worried about, and it isn't really worried. I just want eyes on it at the temp." "All right. And Natalie?" "What?" "The dress is good." She said it without looking at her. She said it the way she said everything she said in a working tasting room on a working morning to a working winemaker she had been hired by on a contract through November 1st. She heard Natalie not move for a half-second behind her. "Thank you," Natalie said very quietly. She went to the kitchen. Sloane finished the seating chart. She finished it very precisely. Her hand was, she noticed, not entirely steady. She wrote the names in pencil. The lunch was, professionally speaking, the best distributor lunch Sloane had run in 2 years. She did not say so afterward. It was not, in 11 years, the kind of thing Sloane Vega said about her own work. The work was the work. You ran the room and you went home. You did not stand on the gravel afterward congratulating yourself for it. But she registered, as she ran it, that the room was hers in a way the room had not been hers at a distributor lunch in some time. Bill from Pacific Coast committed to the reserve at 12 cases on the strength of a single pour, and the way Natalie said the word Block 7. The vegetarian, a woman named Karen, from a Bay Area portfolio that Sloane had been unable to crack at any of the last 3 estates she had worked with, booked another visit before dessert. The small pour, I'm driving one, Henry, he was always named some version of Henry, drank 3 small pours and asked if there was any of that left, and asked also with genuine curiosity, who is this winemaker, where has she been hiding, which was the line that Sloane had been waiting for at every lunch for 19 months, and when it came did not allow herself to react to except with a small Natalie, at the head of the table, was, Sloane allowed herself between the second and third courses at the foot, with her own water glass at her mouth, this one observation, magnificent. She was magnificent in a way Sloane had not been prepared for. Sloane had been prepared for competent. She had been prepared for a woman who could hold her own at her own table for 90 minutes, if she was given the right seat and the right script. She had not been prepared for a woman who, when Bill from Pacific Coast had asked her, 20 minutes in, what does the new reserve mean to you, had set her wine glass down very carefully and said in a voice that was completely her own and that Sloane had not yet heard her use. It means I have decided to stop apologizing for what we make on Block 7. The table had gone briefly quiet. Bill had set down his glass too. Karen had taken out her phone, not to text Sloane saw but to write something down. The sentence had landed in the room the way a good wine landed on a tongue, which was, cleanly, fully, without translation. Sloane, at the foot of the table with her water glass at her mouth, had stared into the middle distance over Natalie's shoulder, and had said to herself, in the voice she used for working through a difficult cellar, Vega. You are a professional. You do not look at her. You look at Bill. She had looked at Bill. She had run the rest of the room. Natalie had twice in the next 40 minutes glanced down the length of the walnut at her, and Sloane, twice, had been ready, and Sloane, twice, had not glanced back. It was, Sloane registered, around 2:40 when the last car pulled out of the gravel drive, the longest lunch she had ever run in her life. Marisol walked her to the cottage at 3:15. Sloane had not asked Marisol to walk her to the cottage. Marisol had simply, when the last of the distributor cars had gone and Jamie had taken Natalie inside to debrief, started walking down the lavender path next to her with her hands in the pockets of her cardigan, the way Marisol walked next to people she had already decided things about. And Sloane, who had decided sometime in the previous 5 days that she was going to be entirely honest with Marisol Cruz for as long as she was on the property, walked alongside her without complaint. They got to the cottage door. Marisol stopped on the gravel. Sit, she said, pointing at the cottage porch step. Sloane sat. Marisol sat next to her. Not touching. A foot away. She unwrapped a piece of hard candy from the pocket of the cardigan. She had, every day Sloane had been on the property, kept hard candy in that pocket, and she held the candy out, and Sloane took it, and she put it in her mouth, and Marisol unwrapped one for herself, and they sat on the cottage porch step in the warm light of 3:20 in the afternoon, and Marisol said, You did good in there. She did good in there. You are very careful with her. A pause. Yes, Sloane said. Why? Sloane did not answer for a moment. The candy was butterscotch. It was not a flavor she had eaten since she was 9. Marisol Cruz was the second person in 11 years whose questions Sloane had decided in advance she was going to answer honestly, and the first person had been Theo, and Theo was 3,000 miles away. Because she is Marisol, Sloane said. I'm not going to do an inappropriate thing here. With her. I want you to know that. I am being paid by her. I am living in her cottage. I am running her wine program. I won't. Mija. What? Marisol looked at her sideways. Marisol was, from the side, 20 years older than the front of her face had ever suggested. The light was very gentle. She is a grown woman, Marisol said. I know that. She is 40 years old. She has been running this place for almost 20 years. She has been alone for a longer time than she has been with anyone. She is a grown woman, Mija, and what happens between you and her is between you and her, and it is not for me to tell you that you cannot do an inappropriate thing. What I will tell you. Marisol took the candy out of her mouth and looked at it for a second. Then she put it back in. What I will tell you is this. Be careful with her in a different way than you are being careful with her right now. Yes? She is not going to break. Do not be careful with her like she is going to break. She has not broken in 20 years. She is not going to break now. Be careful with her like she has been waiting for a long time, Mija. A silence. Yes, Sloane said. How long have you known? Since you got out of the truck. Since the porch, Mija. The first day. Sloane laughed once low. Marisol smiled at the gravel. The candy clicked very faintly against her teeth. I will tell you also one thing, Marisol said, because you are going to need it. She does not know yet. Yes. Not the way you know. Yes. You are going to go ahead of her, in this thing. By weeks possibly. You are going to be in a room knowing it, and she is going to be in the room not knowing it. Be patient. Yes? Yes. All right. All right. Marisol patted Sloane on the knee once, Marisol's whole hand benediction, and got up. She walked in her cardigan in the soft light, back up the lavender path toward the main house, with one of Sloane's butterscotch wrappers crumpled in her left hand. Sloane sat on the cottage porch step for a long time. She did not cry. She had not cried about a woman in 11 years. But she sat on the porch step with her elbows on her knees and the candy in her mouth, and the warm of 3:20 in the afternoon on the back of her neck, and she said very quietly to Marisol's lavender, to nobody. She has been waiting for a long time. And then, more quietly. So have I. Across the property, in the kitchen of the main house at 1 in the morning, Natalie Rousseau opened her laptop on the kitchen island. She did not turn on the overhead light. The only light in the room was the under-cabinet strip over the sink, and the small blue glow of the laptop, and a half glass of the 4-tank Pinot, Sloane's Pinot, that she had poured for herself before bed and had not yet been able to drink. She opened her browser. She typed 3 letters into the address bar. She paused. She had not in 14 months looked up Sloane Vega. She had been, on this point, exceptionally disciplined. She had been disciplined because the discipline had been, for 14 months, the only thing standing between her and a knowledge she had not been ready to have, and she had been disciplined because she had understood, at some level, that her grandfather would have called animal and that her mother would have called vulgar, and that Marisol would have called wise, that the day she sat at her own kitchen island in the dark and opened her laptop and typed Sloane Vega's name into a search bar would be the day she had given herself permission to want a thing that she had not given herself permission to want since she was 19 years old in a college library in Davis, with a girl's thigh against her thigh. She typed the rest of the name. She hit return. The first image that came up was a press photo from the Wine Spectator 40th anniversary panel last fall. Sloane in a black blazer, no shirt under the blazer, leaning forward at a table with a glass of something pale in her right hand, laughing at something somebody to her left had said. The photographer had caught her at the laugh. Her teeth were very white. The leaf on the inside of her left wrist was visible against the pale glass. She was, Natalie understood, in real time in her own kitchen at 1 a.m. in a robe, with her hand pressed flat to the cold of the marble, beautiful. Not handsome. Not striking. Beautiful, in a way that should not have been a surprise to a woman who had been looking at her face every day for 13 days, and was anyway. She scrolled. She scrolled past the spectator photo. She scrolled past a panel from a sommelier conference in 2019. She scrolled past a single shot from what appeared to be a wedding, Sloane in a gray suit, no tie, her arm around a tall woman in a dress, both of them squinting into a sun. Theodore Park's wedding, June 2018, the caption said, and she stopped briefly on the tall woman and registered that the tall woman was not Sloane's date. The tall woman was Sloane's friend's bride. The wedding was Theo's. Theo, a favorite person in the wine world. Theo, of the gala RSVP. She scrolled. She found on the second page a profile interview from a sapphic culture site she had not in her life ever opened, dated 2021, headline, Sloane Vega doesn't care if you drink the right wine. She read it. She read it twice. The interview was 40 minutes long and very funny, and did not mention Sloane's romantic life directly except in one moment, late, where the interviewer asked about the leaf tattoo on the inside of her wrist, and Sloane said, "It's a grape leaf. I got it the day I passed the master exam. I was 29. I had no money, and I'd just blown a $1,000 bottle of wine on the floor of a tasting room in Burgundy on a Tuesday, and I'd come home from the trip and I couldn't sleep, and I went and got it at 6 in the morning at this place in the Mission. The artist asked me what I wanted. I said something I'd remember. He said something you'd remember in 50 years, or something you'd remember tomorrow? And I said, you said. I said tomorrow, please. And he laughed at me. And I got the leaf." The interviewer, after the laugh, asked her if she had ever been in love. Sloane in print said, "Twice. Briefly. I have, both times, gotten in my truck and driven." Natalie sat at the kitchen island in the dark with her hand on her wineglass and read that sentence 3 times. She closed the laptop. She picked up the wineglass. She drank the 4-tank, Sloane's Pinot, slowly in the dark at her own island with her hair down in her grandmother's robe. She thought very clearly, in the kitchen at 1:14 in the morning. "So come find me before you get in the truck." She did not say it out loud. She thought it. She put the empty glass in the sink. She did not rinse it. She walked in the dark up the stairs of her own house with one hand on the banister, and she went, this time, finally after 14 months, to the second drawer of her grandfather's desk in her own office on the second floor. She took out the review. She did not read it. She held it in her hand for a long minute. Then she put it back. She closed the drawer. She went to bed. She slept for the first time in 2.5 years, a deep dreamless sleep, until just before the dawn. Chapter 9. It was a Thursday. It was a Thursday at 10 at night, which was past the hour at which they normally work together. They had been, since the distributor lunch, in a different rhythm. The days longer, the cellar work harder, Sloane on the property till 7 and 8 and twice till 9, with Diego working alongside her, with Marisol bringing them dinner on a tray to the cellar twice that week, and tonight Sloane had said at 6 in the kitchen, leaning in the doorway with her thumbs hooked in her front pockets. "I want to do the gala pairings tonight. The full menu. Tasting room. 9. 9. That's late. All right. I'll bring the bottles up at 8. Be there at 9. All right." She had eaten dinner at the kitchen island with Marisol at 7. Marisol had not asked her about anything, which was how Natalie understood that Marisol knew everything. Marisol had set down a bowl of pasta in front of her, with a knob of butter on the top of it, the way a person set down a plate for a person who had stopped eating in the previous week and needed reminding, and Marisol had eaten her own pasta in a comfortable silence, and at the end of dinner Marisol had said, picking up the bowls, "Wear the green silk." Marisol. "I'm just saying." Marisol. "Go," Marisol had said. "Go, mija. Brush your hair. Wear the silk. I am going home." Diego is in the truck. She had gone upstairs. She had not this time changed her clothes 3 times. She had stood at her own closet for 2 minutes in a robe, and she had taken out the green silk blouse, the one from the first Saturday, and she had put it on, and she had put on the dark wool skirt that went with it, and she had taken her hair down and put it back up in the lower clip, and she had looked at herself in the mirror in her own bedroom at 8:40 on a Thursday in late August with 28 days left to save the estate, and she had said out loud to her own reflection, "All right, Natalie." She had walked down to the tasting room. Sloane was at the bar. She was, Natalie noticed, in pieces again, because she still could not take her in all at once, in a soft white shirt this time, the sleeves rolled, the buttons undone, the same 3 with a navy half-apron tied at her waist that she only wore when she was going to be opening a great many bottles in succession. The half-apron was a working garment. The half-apron was not, by any reasonable definition, supposed to be a thing Natalie's eyes went to. The half-apron was a thing Natalie's eyes went to. There were on the bar 11 bottles. There were on the long walnut table 11 empty burgundy bowls and 11 empty Bordeaux. There were 3 small white plates with tasting portion bites, a smear of mushroom duckles, a thin pale slice of pork rillette, a single grilled peach quarter, that Sloane had clearly arranged on the plates herself in the last 40 minutes with a chef's tweezers, because they were arranged like a chef had done it, and Natalie had not given any chef permission to be in this tasting room tonight. "You did the food," she said. "I did the food." "Where?" "Marisol's kitchen. I'm not very good. They're prompts. Don't eat them like a meal. Taste them with the wine." "All right. Sit down." She sat. Different chair again. Sloane had pulled a different one for her tonight, which Natalie understood Sloane was now doing on purpose. The chair tonight was at the corner of the walnut, on the long side, with a single burgundy bowl set neatly at her right hand and a single Bordeaux at her left, and a small white plate with the duckles in front of her and a candle, only one tonight, a single beeswax taper in a brass holder halfway down the table, going gently in the dim. Sloane was at the bar still, opening the first bottle. "We're doing it in courses," Sloane said over her shoulder. 6 courses. 11 wines. Some of the courses are double pours. We're going to drink, you and me, an inadvisable amount of wine in the next 2 hours, and you are not going to drive anything afterward, and neither am I, and we are going to have, at the end of it, a final menu I can put in front of the caterer on Monday." "All right. Are you ready?" "Yes." She sounded, in her own voice, almost steady. She thought the almost was probably hers alone to hear. "Course 1, Sloane said. The duckles. You said your mother's mushroom thing. We're going to do a small mushroom tart at the gala for the head table, and I want to pair it with 2 whites and 1 red, and I want you to tell me which of the 3 goes." She poured. She poured each of 3 pours into Natalie's 3 glasses on her own, and she came around to Natalie's side of the table, and she set the bottle down on the walnut, and she did not, this time, sit on the table. She sat in the chair next to Natalie, on her left, at the corner, with her own 3 glasses set in front of herself, and she said easily, "Don't think. Just taste. Tell me which one is the answer." Natalie did the work. She did the work for an hour. She had, despite herself, despite the silk, despite the apron, despite the candlelight, slid into the work the way a body slid into water, and Sloane had, patiently, professionally, with the chef's tweezers and a small black pen and her notebook open between them, moved them through the first 4 courses, and they had a working menu by 10:15, and Sloane had, just past 10:15, gotten up to switch out the bowls for fresh ones and to bring up the 5th course from the bar. "Course 5, Sloane said. "The veal." "Yes. This one I don't need to ask you about. We already know. 2 glasses of the 04. We're going to use it as a pause. I'm going to walk you through the talking points for the head table pour. So we're not blind on this one. Yes? Yes." She brought up the bottle. It was a different bottle of the 04 than the one they had drunk on Saturday. Diego had pulled a second from the cellar that afternoon, Sloane had said over dinner, because they needed two for the gala anyway, and a third tonight to taste against. She uncorked it, standing at the head of the table this time. The cork came clean. She poured a single small measure into a fresh burgundy bowl, only the one, and she set the bowl on the walnut between them. Between them. Not in front of Natalie. Not in front of herself. In the small inch of walnut between Natalie's right hand and Sloane's left hand at the corner of the table where they had been sitting for an hour. "One glass," Sloane said. "What?" "One glass tonight. We're working off 2 bottles for the gala, and we already opened 1 bottle of it on Saturday. I'm not opening a third. We share." "All right. You drink first." "Sloane?" "You drink first, Natalie. It's your wine. It's your grandfather's. You drink first." She reached for the glass. Sloane's hand was on it. Sloane had, Natalie registered in the moment, with absolute clarity, set the glass on the walnut and had not yet taken her hand off it. The hand was loose around the bowl. The fingers were long. The leaf on the inside of her left wrist was just above the rim. Natalie reached for the glass. Her hand closed around the stem. Sloane's hand did not move. For a half-second, they were both holding the glass. Natalie's hand on the stem. Sloane's hand on the bowl. The wine in the glass, the dark deep red, the same red as Saturday, caught the candlelight and laid a small wavering coin of it across the back of Sloane's hand and the inside of Natalie's wrist, and the 4-inch piece of walnut between them, and Sloane, still not letting go, said very low in a voice Natalie had not yet heard her use. "You drink first." "All right. Then you give it to me." "All right." Sloane let go. Natalie lifted the glass. She lifted it slowly. Her hand was, to her surprise, to her quiet, embarrassed surprise, steady for the first 8 inches of the lift. The hand did its work. The glass came to her mouth. She tilted it. The wine met her lip. She tasted. She held the wine on her tongue for the count of 2. She swallowed. She lowered the glass. Sloane was watching her. Sloane was watching her in a way that did not anymore have any of Saturday's careful composure laid over the top of it. Sloane was just watching her. "What does it taste like?" Sloane said. "Rain." Still. Still every time, Sloane. "Good." She held the glass out. Sloane reached for it. Sloane's fingers taking the glass, Natalie watched it happen in slow candlelit clarity, closed around the stem in a very specific place. They closed around the stem in the precise place where Natalie's own fingers had just been. 2 fingers, an inch of stem warm from her hand. Sloane closed her fingers there. Sloane did not adjust them. She held the glass exactly where Natalie had been holding it, and then, very deliberately, in a single small slow movement, with her eyes on Natalie's eyes, she rotated the glass a quarter turn in her hand. A quarter turn. So that the place Natalie's mouth had been on the rim was now the place Sloane's mouth would be. Sloane lifted the glass. She lifted it slowly. She held Natalie's eyes for the lift. Her hand, which had been steady all evening, in the cellar Tuesday, on the catwalk Wednesday, at the bar 20 minutes ago, was, Natalie saw, very faintly not steady now. The wine in the glass was very faintly moving. It was a small movement. It was not the movement of a hand that was nervous. It was the movement of a hand that was holding back from doing a thing other than the thing the hand was currently being asked to do. The rim met Sloane's lip. Her mouth was, Natalie could not look away from it, exactly where Natalie's had been. Sloane drank. Slowly. A small mouthful. Her eyes the entire time on Natalie's. She held the wine on her tongue. She closed her eyes for 1 second, only one, and Natalie, in the candlelight, in the green silk, in the corner chair with her hand on her own thigh under the table and her right hand still warm from the stem of the glass, watched a woman taste her grandfather's wine off the place where her own mouth had just been, and watched the woman swallow, and watched the woman open her eyes again. Sloane lowered the glass. She did not put it down. She held it in her hand, halfway between them, just above the walnut, with her thumb on the place where Natalie's thumb had been 20 seconds before, and her index finger on the place where Natalie's index finger had been, and she said very quietly in the same low voice as before, "Tell me what it tastes like." "Sloane? Tell me, Natalie." "It tastes? What? It tastes like..." The word that wanted to come out of her mouth was not a word about wine. The word that wanted to come out of her mouth was a name, in the same low voice that had just said hers, and she did not let it. She closed her hand over her own knee under the table, and she said, "It tastes like you." Sloane went still. The glass in her hand did not move. The candlelight on the side of Sloane's throat moved very slightly with what Natalie could see was a swallow that had not been a wine swallow. A long full second. Then Sloane set the glass down on the walnut, gently between them, with her hand laid for a moment on the wood next to it. She did not look away. "Natalie." "Yes. I am going to put this glass down. I have just put this glass down. I am going to write course 504 Pinot, head table only in my notebook, and I am going to bring up course 6 from the bar, which is the cheese course, and we are going to taste through 3 more wines tonight, and we are going to finish the menu by 11, and I am going to walk back to the cottage at 11:15, and you are going to walk back to the main house at the same time, and we are not going to do anything else tonight other than the work we sat down here to do. All right. Do you understand me?" "Yes." "Look at me, Natalie." Natalie looked at her. "I am not going to be careless with you," Sloane said. That was the whole sentence. She did not say with this, and she did not say with us, and she did not say any of the words that a more practiced woman might have used for the small, narrow, specific thing she was in fact talking about. She said with you, and she said it as if the you were not a euphemism, but a fact, a place, a piece of earth, and Natalie, in the green silk, in the candlelight, in the corner chair, registered with absolute clarity that the woman across the corner of the walnut was telling her, in 7 words, that she had already understood what was happening between them and was intentionally, deliberately, and at her own visible cost, slowing it down. "Sloane? Thank you. For what? For saying it that way." A small thing happened at the corner of Sloane's mouth. It was not the corner thing. It was different. It was the unguarded version of the corner thing, the one she had let Natalie see in the Rose that Thursday, the one that was not a working smile and not a flirtation, and not any of the working faces Sloane Vega had developed for working rooms. It was, Natalie understood, and she was getting better, it seemed, at understanding small things at speed, the way Sloane Vega looked when she did not, for a single full second, have the energy to manage her own face. "Course 6, Sloane said, getting up. "All right. Cheese. All right. 3 wines, none of which are the 04, which is going back in the cellar tonight where it belongs. All right." She went. She got course 6. She brought it up. She poured. They worked. They worked for 35 more minutes the way 2 people worked who had decided, jointly, in the same room, in the same moment, that they were both adults, and the work, astonishingly, in a way Natalie had not been prepared for, was in fact good. They finished the menu. Sloane wrote final across the top of the page in her notebook, in a left-handed scrawl. She drew a small box around it. She closed the notebook. She stood up. "Good night, Natalie." "Good night, Sloane." She walked to the door. She did not look back. She was at the door, her hand on the doorframe, her body half turned, when she stopped, briefly, and she said over her shoulder in the working voice from the bar earlier, as if it were a postscript, "The blouse." "What?" "I thought about that blouse for 2 weeks." She left. The door closed behind her. The candle on the walnut flickered once and went on burning. Natalie sat in the chair at the corner of the long walnut table for a long time. Her hand was on her knee. Her hand was pressing very hard into her knee. The wine glass was on the walnut between her right hand and the place Sloane's left hand had been. She picked the glass up. There was a small last sip in it. She put her mouth on the rim, exactly where her mouth had been before, exactly where Sloane's mouth had been after, and she finished it. She set the glass back down. She blew out the candle. She walked slowly by the dim of the bar light to the door. She stopped at the door and pressed her forehead, briefly, against the cool wood of the doorframe. She stayed there for a count of 3. Then she walked alone in the dark, the 200 feet up the gravel path to the back porch, with one hand pressed flat to the silk over her sternum, where her own heart was doing a thing she had not before tonight known it was capable of doing in a woman's chest at 40. She went up the stairs. She closed her bedroom door. She did not this time stand against it. She walked to the bed. She sat on the edge of it. She put her face in her hands. She laughed once, low and short and surprised, into her own palms, in the dark in her own bedroom, alone at 11:20 on a Thursday night in August, 28 days before the bank deadline, and she said into her hands quietly, in a voice she could only barely hear, "Oh. Oh." She lay down. She did not turn out the light, because she had not turned it on. She fell asleep eventually on top of the covers in the green silk, with her right hand pressed to the place over her sternum where her heart was, and her left hand curled loose against her cheek, and her mouth still tasting faintly of rain.
11:20 on a Thursday night in late August. Natalie Rousseau, 40, divorced, 28 days from losing her family vineyard, sitting on the edge of her own bed in a green silk dress she did not know she owned. The sommelier she hired walked out of the tasting room 40 minutes ago. Her mouth still tastes faintly of rain. Her face is in her hands. She's laughing, once, low, short, surprised, into her own palms. Oh. Oh. That's where we leave her. Wine Me, Dine Me by Aurora North. Ebook, paperback, and audio available everywhere. Link in the description. There's also a bonus chapter, too explicit for retail, set 2 years past the wedding in the 11th row of a candlelit barrel cellar. Free on the website, linked below. This has been Fractal Enigma Audio Previews. See you next time.